Number 10, Daniel Gerard Shinka Jr. 28-year-old Daniel Gerard Shinka Jr. was an incredibly accomplished young man by the time he had reached 28. At the time of his disappearance in 1999, David was studying astrophysics and philosophy and was also a U.S. Navy veteran. When not pondering the limits of time and space, Daniel enjoyed drawing pencil portraits, and like everything else, Daniel was amazing at it. He also played classical guitar and loved to attend karate classes. So, what happened to this bright and outgoing young man? In 1997, Daniel was officially diagnosed with bipolar disorder, although which of the two types has never been specified. Bipolar disorder is characterized by swings of depression and mania. For some people, these swings of mania can take over and feel never-ending, while others plunge into deep depressions for months, only to fall into a manic episode out of nowhere. Bipolar is a complicated disorder, and those with bipolar are not dangerous or a harm to others, so if you or anyone you know is suffering with mental health, please reach out. There's lots of help out there for you and people who want you to do well. After being diagnosed, Daniel was put on medication to help him curb his moods, and for a while it seemed that Daniel was doing well. That was until he stopped taking his medication, which only made his condition deteriorate further. In May of 1999, shortly before his disappearance, Daniel had swung into another manic episode, and his family was extremely concerned for him. They attempted to have him hospitalized to receive treatment, but Daniel refused. This would be one of the last times his family ever had contact with him, sadly. On the evening of May 28th, Daniel's sister got a phone call from him, and she could tell he was very unwell. He was rambling and shouting at her and proceeded to threaten other members of the family as they tried to calm him down. The situation only escalated further, and his sister called the police, letting them know that Daniel had threatened them and that he was extremely unwell and a danger to himself. Unfortunately, the Phoenix, Arizona Police Department refused to get involved, and according to the Charlie Project, they said they could not become involved as Daniel had not made a specific threat against anyone. He had just threatened his family in general, apparently. With that, the case was dropped, and this would be the last time that Daniel's family ever heard from him. His family tried to call him multiple times, begging and pleading to the universe to grant their wish of hearing Daniel's voice again, but the phone kept ringing through before clicking to voicemail. With Daniel's condition on their minds, the family continued to attempt contact with him, and it wasn't until 11 days after the disturbing phone call that the Phoenix Police Department became involved. 11 days after he made his final phone call, the police department gained entry to Daniel's apartment and found a few clues. Sitting on the table was an open notebook, a Bible, and a full glass of soda. None of these items led the police to Daniel, but then they saw the light of his answering machine blinking. Curious, they checked his answer phone and found a message from a man who had found Daniel's wallet and was offering to return it. In the call, the man described how he had found Daniel's wallet along a road leading into the Four Peaks Wilderness area in the Tonto National Forest on May 29, 1999. The man left his personal details and asked Daniel to get in touch with him to arrange giving the wallet back, but Daniel never called him. Armed with this new information, the Phoenix Police Department headed to the Four Peaks Wilderness area and found Daniel's car near the Klein trailhead. The car had been abandoned with the key still inside, but there was no sign of Daniel. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, as we often see, leaving no trace behind. Daniel's family would later confirm with officers that he enjoyed day hiking, but had not hiked in the Four Peaks Wilderness area since he was a small child. He was familiar with the Camelback Mountain and Squaw Peak areas, but there was no indication that he had gone to either of those places. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office also joined in the search for Daniel, but they were unable to uncover any evidence, and the search was eventually called off. Since then, Daniel's case has gone cold, and the police have received very few tips and leads. According to trackmissing.org, Daniel did not take his camping or hiking equipment with him when he left and only took a sleeping bag. Daniel's family and the U.S. Navy veteran community are continuing their search for him and are asking anyone with any information to come forward. Daniel Danny Gerard Shinka Jr. is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes. He stands 6 foot 1 inches tall and weighs 170 pounds. He had scars on both knees and requires medication to treat his bipolar disorder. He was last seen wearing a horizontally striped navy blue and medium gray shirt, light blue denim shorts, and Nike running shoes. Anyone with any information is urged to please contact the Phoenix Police Department at 602-262-6151 and reference case number 908-84103. Number 9. Charles Dwayne Gustafson. 72-year-old Charles Dwayne Gustafson was an upstanding member of his community in Minnesota and was a devoted father to his 4 daughters. Charles had studied at an agricultural school in his youth, helping out on the family farmstead where he would later retire. Charles traveled around the country for different jobs and even enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1955. An article written by the Grand Forks Herald detailed Charles' life and achievements, noting that during his time in the Air Force, he taught techniques of survival for global conditions to Air Force personnel. Charles was incredibly adept in survivalism and the outdoors, and his time on the farm, stripping logs and in the Air Force, suited his outgoing, adrenaline junkie nature. In 1969, Charles settled down and married the love of his life, Patricia Rasmussen. Together, the couple had 4 daughters and were said to be the picture-perfect family. Charles and Patricia were devoted to their children, and when it was time to retire, their children couldn't be happier that their parents were finally getting the break they deserved. During his short time of retirement, Charles would often wander the farm and did his bit for the local community. Charles also loved to hunt, and one hunting expedition would change the course of the Gustafsons' life forever. On October 11, 2006, Charles and a group of his family members headed out into the Medicine Bow National Forest near Arlington, Wyoming. The group hoped to hunt some prize elk and bring them home. At around 6:55 a.m., Charles was seen at the road junction of Highway 111 and 129 in Carbon County. This would be the last time anyone would ever see him. Charles had split off from the group, with the agreement being that he would arrive at camp some hours later. But Charles never arrived. Time ticked away, and his family members started to become incredibly concerned. Using the skills that he had taught them, they fired 3 shots in the air to give away their location. 3 shots were fired back, but Charles was never found. His family found it incredibly strange that he would fire 3 shots back, if indeed it was him, but not make his way back to the camp. Perhaps he was injured and in need of help, they thought. His family traversed through the Medicine Bow National Forest, following the sounds of his shots, but they found no sign of him. It was at this point that the Gustafsons knew that this was serious, and the Carbon County Sheriff's Office was called to the scene. The Sheriff's Office, along with search and rescue teams, searched for him for days, but ultimately found nothing. With it being October in Wyoming, the temperatures had plummeted, and a thin blanket of snow had settled on the ground. Concerns for his welfare were growing with every minute that passed, but there were simply no clues to follow. Charles' family revealed to investigators that on October 10, 2006, Charles had gotten lost after separating from the group, but was thankfully found on that occasion. They also added that Charles was incredibly familiar with the Medicine Bow National Forest and had been hunting and hiking there for over a decade. Nothing in Charles' case made sense to investigators or his family. He was a former U.S. Air Force officer and was incredibly skilled under dire conditions. So what had happened to him? As the days wore on and there was no sign of him, the search was eventually called off. A year later, in 2007, Charles was officially declared deceased by the state of Minnesota, and his family held a memorial service for him. Charles Dwayne Gustafson is described as a white male with graying blonde hair, blue eyes, standing 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighing 160 pounds. He wears wireframe glasses, has a small surgical scar on his face, an overbite and several fillings in his teeth. He was last seen wearing a brown hooded sweatshirt, a blaze orange vest, charcoal gray pants, a camouflage print fanny pack, a blaze orange hat, his wedding ring, and a black Casio watch. The Charlie Project also notes that Charles was carrying the following items: a Winchester .30-06 rifle with green camouflage print stock and a blue metal barrel with a 3x9 scope, a map, a GPS device, a compass, ammo for the rifle, lunch, water, and a hunting knife. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Carbon County Sheriff's Office at 307-324-2776 and reference case number 06-002613. Number 8. Robert Lson Hughes. On August 17, 2008, 59-year-old Robert Lson Hughes left his home in Williamsville, Vermont for what would be the last time. He told his family that he was traveling to Provincetown, Massachusetts, for a business meeting. a meeting that he had no intentions of returning from. According to witnesses, the Appalachian Mountain Club shuttle, which takes guests from the nearby lodge and hotels to tourist spots and hiking areas, dropped him off at around 12:30 p.m. The shuttle driver that day recalled that they dropped Robert off at the head of Zealand Falls Trail in the Pemigewasset Wilderness area of the White Mountain National Forest that's located in New Hampshire. To those around him, it appeared as though Robert was making the most of his business trip, but inside his mind, there was something much darker going on. After departing the shuttle, Robert Hughes has never been seen or heard from, and 3 days later, his wife would receive a devastating letter. On August 20th, 2008, Robert's wife collected the mail and found a handwritten envelope from her husband. Inside were letters to his family members. These letters detailed how he had planned to take his own life in the White Mountains. His family were distraught and immediately contacted the authorities, who started the search for him. Unfortunately, despite the combined efforts of the Vermont State Police, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and search and rescue crews, no sign of Robert has ever been found. Investigators did find that shortly before his disappearance, Robert had tried to make a booking for the Appalachian Mountain Club's Zealand Falls Hut Hotel, but the request never went through. His car was later found at the Appalachian Mountain Club's Highland House in Crawford Notch, but it appears no evidence was retrieved. There's been no movement on his phone or bank accounts, and now his family are still desperate for answers. Robert Lson Hughes is described as a white male with gray hair, blue eyes, stands 6 foot tall, and weighs 190 pounds. Robert had shown intentions of self-harm, and authorities are incredibly concerned for his welfare. Anyone with any information, Shasta Police contact the Vermont State Police at 802-254-2382 and reference case number 08D202534. Number 7. Daniel Joseph Marx. Daniel Joseph Marx was described by his family as a quiet and reserved person who loved to spend time writing music and focusing on his studies. By 2005, Daniel had obtained his bachelor's degree in music from Antioch College and was due to start at Portland State University the next year, focusing on environmental studies. Daniel was kind and passionate and well connected with his family, so when he failed to make it home for Thanksgiving, he immediately knew something was very wrong. November 19, 2005 was supposed to be a day of joy and reunification. Daniel had moved to Portland, Oregon to pursue his education, leaving his family behind in Minnesota, but he was never one to miss the holidays. As planes came and went from the Twin Cities Airport in Minnesota, Pat and her sister, Mary Falk, excitedly waited for Daniel to walk through the gate. Time passed, and there was still no sign of Daniel, and that is when the excitement turned to worry. Pat later recalled in an interview, "Daniel was a no-show. I knew there was something wrong." Pat's mother's intuition kicked in, and she spoke to the airline and discovered something shocking. She found that Daniel had never even boarded the plane from Portland, Oregon to Minnesota. By this point, Pat knew in her gut that Daniel was in danger and contacted the local authorities. Pat's family rallied around her and helped her out in whatever way they could. Luckily, one of the Marx family was computer savvy and managed to access Daniel's emails, which gave them more clues. In Daniel's inbox sat an email from Miko from Maui. The mysterious Miko had invited Daniel to Maui for a week-long trip of hiking and sightseeing. Pat passed all this information over to the Portland police, who entered Daniel's apartment and found nothing out of the ordinary. The police, both in Minnesota and in Oregon, agreed that it was time to reach out to the Kauai Police Department, and a full U.S.-wide investigation was officially opened. Police in the islands took the report seriously, and they began retracing Daniel's steps and interviewing any potential witnesses. Through their diligence, they were able to establish that Daniel had arrived in the islands on November 9, 2005, and had stayed in a hostel. A witness remembered talking to Daniel on November 10, 2005, with Daniel telling him that he was heading to Kalalau Valley and was meeting someone there. The last confirmed sighting of Daniel Marx was on November 10, 2005, at around 4 p.m., when he was seen overlooking Waimea Canyon along the Pahia Trail in the Kokay State Park. After this, Daniel seemed to simply drop off the map and has never been seen or heard from again. Some people reported seeing Daniel carrying tent poles in a small backpack, although there have been varying statements given to investigators. A large-scale search of the area and the state park was conducted, but no sign of Daniel was ever found. Investigators also tried to email back to mysterious Miko, but it appears there was no reply. Investigators in Hawaii believe that Daniel became lost or injured while hiking and had no way of calling for help. There have been multiple sightings of Daniel in the islands, leading many to believe that he may still be there with no recollection of who he is. Some people give credence to this theory following an article published by Vendy.com where Pat goes into detail about Daniel's teenage years. According to the article, while in high school in Ohio, another teen assaulted Daniel, giving him a concussion. He lost his memory for a week. Then, while in Oregon for a college semester, Daniel fell and struck his head on concrete. It resulted in a year of memory loss. Daniel was taken to see neurologists, and it was believed at that time that he might have to abandon his degree pursuits due to his condition. His family now wonders whether Daniel had another lapse and is now living homeless in the island somewhere, not knowing who he is or how he got there. Another theory is that Daniel met with foul play, possibly at the hands of Miko or possibly someone else. Pat, Daniel's mother, began noticing that men who resembled her son were being reported missing at an alarming rate in Hawaii and couldn't help but wonder whether something dark was going on. She told Vendy.com, "I don't like the way Daniel received the information about coming to this island. I don't like the fact that there are a number of young men missing who have extremely similar profiles." Daniel did not inform his family of his impromptu trip to Hawaii, which also stuck out to them as odd. He kept in frequent contact with his family, and a holiday to Hawaii seems like something he would have mentioned in conversation. Daniel Marx remains missing, and despite numerous false sightings, no real evidence has ever been found to suggest where he went. Daniel is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, standing 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighing 130 to 140 pounds. Both ears and his tongue were once pierced, and he also has the following tattoos: small black Asian symbols on each temple that are often covered by his hair, and a tattoo of a maple leaf on each upper arm. Daniel also has birthmarks that are pale brown and located on his abdomen. He was possibly last seen wearing a gray t-shirt, khaki cargo pants or shorts, a wrap sarong, sandals, and a watch. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Kauai Police Department at 808-241-1711 and reference case number 2005-30634. Number 6. Jacob Wing. 45-year-old Jacob Wing was last seen on Friday, July 10, 2020, on the Old Baldy Trail in the Madera Canyon in the Coronado National Forest in Tucson, Arizona. According to the few media reports that have been made about Jacob's disappearance, he and a friend entered the canyon on July 11, 2020, and shortly after became separated. The friend tried to look for Jacob, but the vast expanse of the forest made it difficult, so instead he contacted the Pima County Sheriff's Office to officially report his friend missing. Jacob was believed to be carrying a phone at the time, but it is likely that he did not have a signal in the forest. The Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office also joined in on the investigation, and together, the two forces headed out into the forest to try and find Jacob. They were later accompanied by the Department of Public Safety Rangers and Border Patrol in an attempt to locate him quickly. A search and rescue helicopter took to the skies for several days during the searches, but ultimately nothing was ever found. Multiple trails and mountains were searched, looking for any sign of Jacob, and his friend told investigators he had no idea which trail Jacob had headed down when they got separated. Investigators and search and rescue crews continued to search for Jacob until July 13th, when the search was officially called off. All the information available about Jacob's disappearance is brief, and in a statement to the media, Sheriff Tony Estrada of the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office said, "We really don't know what we have right now, and we don't want to speculate on any one thing." Jacob's girlfriend, friend, and family members were all interviewed, but so far no evidence has come to light. There was a bizarre twist added to Jacob's case on July 17, 2020, when the Green Valley News reported that there was a possible witness. According to this article, a hunter ventured down the canyon on July 15, 2020, and saw a man who he is 100% sure was Jacob Wing. The hunter had a brief interaction with the man at around 9:15 a.m. that morning and said the man did not appear to be in distress and did not ask for assistance. Investigators have never confirmed this sighting, and it brings about a whole new set of theories. Unfortunately, Jacob's case has not been entered into NamUs, but it appears that the Santa Cruz and Pima County Sheriff's Offices are continuing to work on his case. Currently, there are no further plans to search the Madeira Canyon, and Jacob's family and friends are hopeful that one day they will have answers. Anyone with any information about Jacob is asked to please contact the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office at 520-761-7869 or the Pima County Sheriff's Office at 520-351-4650. Number 5. Robert Perry Bissell. 57-year-old Robert Perry Bissell was a keen outdoorsman and experienced hiker and hunter. When not working, Robert could be found spending time in the great outdoors, and over his lifetime he had been on hundreds of hunting and hiking expeditions in the United States. Living in Portland, Oregon, gave Robert access to plenty of wilderness spaces, and on July 12, 2010, Robert packed his gear and headed for the Roaring River Wilderness area in the Mount Hood National Forest. On the morning of July 12, 2010, Robert pulled up to the Trailhead 700 in his white 1989 Nissan Sentra and found a place to park. He then hiked around 5 miles to reach his final destination, Middle Rock Lake. Robert set up camp just off trail number 512 and should have settled in for the night, but it was then that something strange happened. Robert had been gone for a few days and his brother was starting to worry. Robert usually ventured into the woods for a few days at a time, but he always made sure to keep in touch with his family. On July 19, 2010, Robert's brother went into Mount Hood National Forest in search of his brother. He came across the camp that Robert had made, along with a note that made it appear though Robert was gone for a night or two and would be back soon. Robert had left behind his sleeping bag and hiking gear, and the only thing that was missing was his fishing rod and tackle. 5 days later, on July 24, 2010, Robert's brother officially reported him missing when he failed to make contact. It was now clear that Robert had not gone on a quick overnight hike and that he was possibly in danger. The Clackamas County Sheriff's Office responded to the incident, sending officers and putting the call out for search and rescue teams. In the coming hours, dozens of volunteers and the Clackamas County Search and Rescue Unit had arrived to help look for Robert. As word spread of his disappearance, more resources poured in, with help coming from helicopters, search dogs, 4x4 vehicles, the Air Force Reserve 304th Rescue Squadron, and the Pacific Northwest Search and Rescue Unit. According to reports, the efforts were heavily focused on the Rock Lakes Basin and the trails that lead to it. With Robert carrying his fishing gear, it's likely he may have headed down that way before disappearing. Unfortunately, no sign of Robert has ever been found, despite an extensive search of Mount Hood National Forest. Investigators and others working on Robert's case made sure to check every single area and possible trail, but nothing was ever found. The search was eventually called off and his family were left in limbo. To this day, what happened to Robert is still unknown, and while there are not any active searches, investigators are still looking into his case. It's believed that Robert left his base camp multiple times to go fishing and hunting, and witnesses recall speaking to him as he was setting up his camp on July 12th of 2010. As of this date, Robert's body, clothes, and fishing gear remain missing, and investigators believe that he became injured during his hike. The terrain in Mount Hood National Forest is very rough, and the Charlie Project even reported that horses who helped in the search had to have their shoes replaced as a result. Robert Perry Bissell was last seen near Trail 512 at Middle Rock Lake on July 12, 2010. He is described as a white male with gray hair, green eyes, standing 5 foot 5 inches tall, and weighing somewhere between 135 to 150 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office at 503-785-5140 and reference case number 2010-22782. Number 4. John Stewart Campbell. 18-year-old John Stewart Campbell of Arcata, California, was a bright and promising student at Humboldt State University. John had his whole life ahead of him, and he was eager to complete his college degree and find his place in the world. Unfortunately, John was robbed of that chance, and now his family are seeking answers and justice. John was last time on February 16, 1985, on the campus of Humboldt State University. There are very few details available in John's case, and all we know is that a residence hall advisor, or an RA, reported him missing after he had not been seen or heard from for a few days. The school informed John's parents, who immediately launched their own search for their son. The Humboldt State University Police Department took on the case, and within a few days, the first clue had emerged. In the days after his disappearance, John's car was found abandoned in a wilderness area. Reports do not state when his car was found or even in which wilderness area it was found. According to University Police Chief Don Peterson, there were no signs of a robbery at the scene, and since then, the case has remained a complete mystery. The prevailing theory is that John was taken against his will in his car. Aside from that, no plausible leads have ever been found. The reports available to us do not indicate whether the car was processed for forensic evidence, and there's little follow-up in John's case, period. The search for John slowly wound down, but that doesn't mean the authorities have given up on his case. John Stewart Campbell was last seen on the campus of Humboldt State University on February 16, 1985. He's described as a white male with blonde hair, blue eyes, standing 5 feet 11 and weighing 160 pounds. The Charlie Project does note that at the time of his disappearance, John was suffering from depression and had some discoloration and freckles on his skin. He was last seen wearing a knee-length gray or green trench coat and was carrying his wallet. Anyone with any information, please contact the Humboldt State University Police at 707-826-5555 and reference case number 09-0177-12562. Number 3. Thomas James Carlton. On October 9, 1993, 44-year-old Thomas James Carlton left his home in Newcomb, New York at around 6 a.m. The morning was bright, the air was crisp, and Thomas knew that his upcoming 3-day hike in the high peaks of the Adirondacks was going to be a good one. Not much is known about Thomas' hike or his disappearance, and investigators later found out that he did not take a tent or stove with him. Thomas had planned on staying in lean-tos along his way. Lean-tos are often featured in national parks and forests and provide hikers and campers with a safe place to cook or hang out. Often, multiple people will sleep and use the lean-to, and it's a great place for hikers to meet and share their stories and have some good company. Adirondack.net advises those wishing to stay in these lean-tos that they should bring a tent, just in case the lean-tos are full. Thomas' wife knew of his plans for a solo hike, and when his due date arrived and there was no sign of him, she reported him missing. Thomas had also failed to report to work at the state prison in New York, where he was a psychologist. This sent alarm bells ringing in his wife's head, as she knew that Thomas was devoted to his work and would not miss a single day without letting anyone know. The New York State Police quickly became involved in Thomas' case, and they set about interviewing those on the trail that day. 2 hikers came forward claiming that they had shared a lean-to with Thomas on Indian Pass Trail, 4 miles southwest of where he had parked his car. Reports do not state on which date they shared the lean-to, though. According to these hikers, Thomas was planning on heading up Indian Pass. As morning came, Thomas bid his farewells and began his hike toward that area. This alleged sighting was likely the last time Thomas was ever seen alive. Police and search and rescue crews scoured the area, but their attempts were hampered by adverse weather. Still, they battled through the rain and snow, but ultimately found nothing. Thomas James Carlton is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, stands 5 foot 11 inches tall, and weighs 170 pounds. Thomas sometimes goes by the nickname Tom and wears prescription glasses. He was last seen wearing a beige wool sweater, a maroon Gore-Tex coat, navy Gore-Tex pants over olive green military pants, a red wool cap, hiking boots, and a teal backpack. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the New York State Police at 518-897-2000 and reference case 93-612. Number 2. Jeremy Ivan Childress. 31-year-old Jeremy Ivan Childress was described as a kind and caring person who was close to his family and loved to spend time outdoors. Jeremy was an expert hunter and often participated in the annual hunting season with his friends and family. Back at home, Jeremy was married and the couple had 2 children, and Jeremy is said to have been an attentive and loving father and husband. On October 17, 2004, Jeremy, his friend Shane Louie, and Shane's son, Shane Jr., hopped into their truck and headed into the Tillamook National Forest. The 3 agreed to head out into Tillamook County, Oregon, and they were excited about their upcoming hunt. The 3 set up a base camp, equipped with everything they would need. Later on in the day, the 3 were heading back to their camp when they became lost. Jeremy soon separated away from the group, and he was now lost too. Shane and Shane Jr. tried shouting for Jeremy and looking for him, but it was as if he disappeared into thin air. The father and son duo finally made it back to camp and noticed that there was still no sign of Jeremy. He had left all his overnight equipment behind, and everything else was untouched. Shane Louis knew that something was very wrong right away, and Jeremy, an experienced hunter and outdoorsman, would never have left his things behind. Shane contacted the Tillamook County Sheriff's Office, and within the hour, investigators were on the scene. According to Shane, he last saw Jeremy at Tucker Creek Road and Boundary Road at around 4:30 p.m. before he mysteriously vanished. A wide-scale search for Jeremy was organized, with investigators and search and rescue teams painstakingly combing over the forest. Tillamook National Forest is filled with rocky and difficult terrain, and it is plausible that Jeremy became injured while trying to find his way back to camp. His mother, Becky Grimes, told the Statesman Journal, "I still have hope that one day he'll be found. I'd much rather have him here with us than up there on that mountain. I still can't go up there. This is not about me. I want this to focus on my son and that he's still missing. This needs to be kept out there. It's not the not knowing, but I do have hope." In 2006, Jeremy's wife had him declared deceased in absentia. Jeremy Childress was last seen on October 17, 2004, as described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, standing 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing 170 pounds. At the time of his disappearance, Jeremy was carrying a rifle, a wallet, his car keys, half a pack of Marlboro Red cigarettes, and possibly a pocket knife. Jeremy has previous fractures to the fingers on his right hand, 2 crooked upper front teeth, with the left one being chipped. He also has the following tattoos: a dolphin and the number 14376 on his right shoulder, and a rising phoenix on his left shoulder. At the time of his disappearance, he was also sporting a mustache. He was last seen wearing a dark brown Carhartt jacket, blue Levi jeans, a blue Nike cap, brown Copeland hiking boots, a silver Citizen watch, and a gold wedding band with 5 diamonds set diagonally. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Tillamook County Sheriff's Office at 503-842-2561 and reference case 2004-14591. And number 1, David Milton Crouch. 27-year-old David Milton Crouch of Stevensville, Maryland, was an avid cyclist and enjoyed everything bike-related. He even owned a bike shop with his wife, and the two were living their dreams and pursuing their passion while also making money. Unfortunately, the bubble of freedom and bliss was broken on a breezy autumn day. August 31st, 1997, David left his home for what would be the last time. David, along with 3 friends, were hiking through the Bridger-Teton National Forest thanks to the help of a guide. The Bridger-Teton National Forest is located in western Wyoming, over 2,000 miles away from his home in Maryland, and it's unlikely that any of the group would have been familiar with the forest. During the hike on August 31st of 97, David became separated from the group, and according to reports, it appears as though he headed off on a solo hike to Island Lake. The Doe Network states that David was last seen at the lake, although this has not been confirmed by law enforcement. David intended to fish at Island Lake before returning to the group, but that unfortunately never happened. When the group realized he was missing, they retraced their steps and began looking for him everywhere. As night fell, the group were forced to retreat to their base camp at Lost Lake and wait out the night. The next morning, the 4 peered out of their tent to find that David was still missing, and that's when they contacted the Sublette County Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office, along with search and rescue teams, flooded into the Bridger-Teton National Forest looking for any sign of the man. Over the evening of August 31st into September 1st, the temperatures had plummeted, and now there were great concerns for David's well-being. As the solo fishing trip had been impromptu, he had not taken any of his supplies with him, including a sleeping bag or warm clothing. Eventually, the search was called off, and despite combing the forest, the Sublette County Sheriff's Office was unable to find any sign of David. Investigators believe that he perished due to the elements and low temperatures that night, and it's possible that he may have been injured along the way and was unable to call for help. David Milton Crouch was last seen on August 31st, 1997 in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. He is described as a white male with brown hair, standing 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing 175 pounds. He was last seen wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and anyone with any information is asked to contact the Sublette County Sheriff's Office at 307-367-4378 and reference case number 97-2891. Number 10, Michael William Doan. 47-year-old Michael Doan of Las Vegas, Nevada, had hit a rough patch in his life in 2009. He had been out of work for some time, and this was causing him anguish and mental pain. Michael's living girlfriend said that in January of 2009, Michael was depressed and unhappy and desperately wanted life to get better. On January 28, 2009, Michael and his girlfriend got into an argument, which resulted in Michael getting into his car and leaving home. His girlfriend believed that Michael was just trying to drive to clear his head, but he never returned home. There are a few details about Michael's disappearance, and all we know is that on January 29, 2009, his car was found in the Desert National Wildlife Range by a park ranger. The car was found 40 miles away from Interstate 95 and Lee Canyon Road. According to the Charlie Project, the ranger saw footprints leading away from the vehicle, but there was no sign of Michael. There have been little to no reports about Michael's disappearance, and we do not know to what extent the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police searched for him. Phone records indicated that shortly after he walked out of the house, he tried to call his girlfriend, but the call never went through. This is the last known movement of Michael Doan, and he has been missing ever since. Michael Doan is described as a white male with graying brown hair, blue eyes, stands approximately 5 foot 10 inches tall, and weighs around 180 pounds. Michael has the following tattoos: a longhorn skull on his chest, an eagle on his back, a Tasmanian devil on his left shoulder, and a picture of the Beatles on his right shoulder. According to both NamUs and the Charlie Project, Michael was last seen wearing a yellow jacket, blue jeans, and black shoes. Anyone with any information regarding Michael or his disappearance is asked to contact Dan Hawley of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department at 702-828-3111. Reference case number 090131-0936. Number 9, Lee Sterling Cutler. 18-year-old Lee Sterling Cutler was described as a kind, responsible, and outgoing person who wanted nothing more than to ease the pain of others. While attending Adlai E. Stevenson High School in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, Lee founded a group called BBYO, a Jewish youth organization that hosted events and acted as support for those who observed the Jewish faith within the community. Lee was a shining star within the group and was dedicated to them. He never missed an event and was always there to support someone when they needed it. In 2006, Lee started showing signs of depression and expressed that he wanted to harm himself, possibly take his own life. This manifested in Lee taking a knife into school, as he explained he could bear the pain no longer. Thankfully, Lee got the help he needed and was hospitalized and given therapy. After this, Lee was slowly getting his life back on track and was looking forward to the future. He had plans to either continue his education or maybe start something different altogether. By 2007, Lee was in his senior year, and it was time to decide his future. Lee had many plans and thought long and hard about what he wanted to do, but before he could enact those plans, he would disappear under bizarre circumstances. On October 19, 2007, Lee spent the night at a friend's house and promised to call his mother, Beth, in the morning. Beth waited all morning for her son to call her and let her know that he was safe and that he made it to work. Sadly, that call never came. Lee was due to start his shift at the clothing store where he worked part-time the next morning, and his employers knew that he was a reliable employee. So when he failed to show up, no call, no show, they knew something was wrong. His mother also sensed that something was wrong. It wasn't unusual for him to forget to charge his phone, but this time things just somehow felt different. Throughout the day, Beth called the store where Lee worked and asked if he'd shown up, but he hadn't. By 5 p.m., Beth was beside herself with worry, and after calling the clothing store for a final time, she then immediately dialed 911. The Buffalo Grove Police Department responded to the call and arrived at the Cutler household. An initial search of Lee's room showed no clues, but investigators did notice that his overnight bag was missing, which he most likely took when he spent the night at a friend's house. Investigators then began retracing Lee's steps and found that the last sighting of him was around 9:50 a.m. on the morning of October 20th, 2009. As investigators interviewed Lee's friends, they found out that on the morning he disappeared, Lee had dropped a friend off at his home in Buffalo Grove at around 9:50 a.m. before leaving and presumably heading toward his workplace. From there, the trail goes cold. Beth made hundreds of calls to Lee's phone, but they either didn't connect or went straight to voicemail. After finding no sign of Lee in or around his home or near his workplace, the search radius expanded. Just a day after Lee disappeared, investigators would get their first break in the case when his 2007 Toyota Corolla was discovered abandoned in Wisconsin near the Baraboo River. The car was locked and abandoned, and there was no sign of Lee anywhere. After the car was discovered, investigators theorized that Lee had likely gone into the woods, and it was known that Lee liked to hike and camp and was familiar with the Baraboo River area. To further add to this theory, investigators found a receipt from the Kettle Moraine State Forest, which was dated October 20th, 2009 at 1:41 p.m. Investigators now channeled their search on the Kettle Moraine State Forest and the Baraboo River area. Search and rescue crews, along with Lee's family and volunteers, began to scour the area, and they quickly found their next clue. Somewhere near the Baraboo River, searchers found Lee's overnight bag that he had taken out with him the night before his disappearance. Some of his personal items, including pants, ID card, wallet, cash, and car keys, were in this bag found by the Baraboo River. Also inside the bag, searchers found pain medication, sleep aid tablets, the book Into the Wild, and handwritten letters to his family and his girlfriend. Into the Wild is a popular book that follows the journey of Christopher McCandless. Christopher sets out into the wilderness of Alaska, only to perish while out looking for his next big adventure. None of the notes mentioned anything about his disappearance, but there was another note found inside the book. This note was addressed to his mother and read, "My head is too big for my shoulders. Finally, I'll be able to sleep. I know I'm not crazy. I love you, Mom. Please be happy." He also apologized to his mother for being a coward, but did not refer to harming himself. The search was now focused exclusively on the Baraboo River, but despite days of intensive searching, no sign of Lee was ever found. His mother and father, who had divorced years earlier, came together to try and find their son. Beth made various TV appearances, pleading for her son to come home. Private investigators and dive teams have been called in to search for Lee, but nothing was ever uncovered. Investigators believe that Lee left of his own volition, is living a new life elsewhere, and doesn't want to be contacted. Lee's case was officially closed by law enforcement. However, he is still listed as a missing person, and his friends and family have never given up the fight to find him. Lee Sterling Cutler was last seen on October 20, 2009 in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. He is described as a white male with light brown hair and brown eyes, standing 6 foot tall and weighing about 150 pounds. Lee always wore a yarmulke and expressed an interest in moving to Israel after he graduated. He has a small bump on his upper lip and slight webbing between 2 of his toes. Lee was last seen wearing khaki pants and a dark blue jacket with a red stripe. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Tara Anderson of the Buffalo Grove Police Department at 847-459-2583 and reference case MO7E4222. Number 8. Celeste W Hensley Grube. 20-year-old Celeste W Hensley Grube was last seen on August 10, 1976, in the Cloud Peak Wilderness in the Bighorn Mountains in Casey, Wyoming. On August 10th, Celeste and 2 of her female friends entered the wilderness area intending to hike to Cloud Peak. According to those 2 friends, Celeste decided to rest on the trailhead while they continued up to Cloud Peak, and the arrangement was that they would meet her on the way back down. By 5 p.m., the 2 friends had completed their hike, and as they made their way down to the trailhead, they saw that Celeste was gone. Her friends searched for her, calling her name, but found no sign of her. The 2 rushed to the nearest ranger station to report their friend missing. Within a few hours, the Johnson County Sheriff's Office had responded to the incident and had officially begun their search. Now, according to the Charlie Project, between 200 and 300 people turned up to help search for Celeste. Many of these were search and rescue professionals, while others were simply volunteers. This group covered about 80 square miles, but failed to find any sign of Celeste. There were rumors that at the time of her disappearance, Celeste was having marital issues, which may have led her to run away and start a new life. However, we will point out that these rumors have never been confirmed. After 2 long weeks, the search for Celeste Grubb was called off as the Johnson County Sheriff's Office and the group of volunteers failed to find any sign of her. When she disappeared, she had no supplies with her and only a small number of sweets on her person. Since August 10, 1976, there's been no sign of Celeste, and she remains a missing person. Celeste Grubb is described as a white female, standing 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighing 115 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Deputy Paul Kozasek of the Johnson County Sheriff's Office at 307-684-5581 and reference case number 18S0075. Number 7. Delisia Annette Wy. Before she disappeared, 24-year-old Delisia Annette Wy left a message on her Facebook page which read, "It's never too late to do the right thing. Don't get discouraged. Speaking to myself also." Just days later, Delisia would be reported missing, and there's been no sign of her since. According to reports, Delisia was last seen in the Kings Dominion Camp Wilderness Campground in the 1000 block of Kings Dominion Boulevard in Doswell, Virginia. On March 9, 2017, Delisia entered the campground and tried to get a spot. Unfortunately, the campground was full, and no matter how hard she begged, Delisia wasn't given a spot. After being refused a spot, Delisia left the campground on foot, leaving her silver Ford Explorer behind. Reports indicate that her car was in good working condition and had plenty of gas inside, so why would she leave it behind? There's also a large chunk of time where Delisia's movements are unaccounted for, and the next sighting of her wasn't made until around 3 or 4 p.m. that afternoon. According to an NBC article, witnesses saw Delisia walking barefoot along Meadow Farm Road in Caroline County, Virginia. Delisia's behavior both worried and disturbed passers-by, and 2 people even filmed her walking along the road barefoot. These same passers-by tried to intervene and offer her help, but according to them, she declined. These are the last known movements of Delisia, and after this, she simply dropped off the map. Her absence was noted by her family, and her mother knew that she always kept in contact. After failing to reach Delisia, her mother contacted the authorities and reported her missing. From there, the 2 forces, Hanover County Sheriff's Office and the Caroline County Sheriff's Office, began retracing Delisia's last movements. It wasn't long until they found her abandoned silver Ford Explorer in the Kings Dominion Camp Wilderness Campground. Investigators noticed, as we said, that the car was in good working order and had plenty of gas. Bizarrely, Delisia's phone, purse, wallet, and license were scattered behind the Meadow Event Park, which was close to where she'd abandoned her car. As news of Delisia's disappearance went public, witnesses came forward with the video of her walking barefoot in Caroline County. The search radius expanded and scent dogs were also brought in to aid in the search. According to the Charlie Project, dogs also tracked her scent to a home in Caroline, Virginia. Was Delisia headed to a specific location, or was she perhaps taken against her will? Another twist in the case came days later when a friend of Delisia's reported seeing her on Bendale Avenue in Richmond, Virginia on March 12, 2017. This friend told investigators that she was not aware that Delisia was missing, and no further information about this sighting has been released. These sightings, and the fact that Delisia did not ask passers-by for help, have led investigators to believe that she may not have been in trouble, although given how much time has passed since she was last seen, their viewpoint has most likely changed. Delisia's mother told the media that it was out of the ordinary for Delisia not to contact her friends or family, and that her behavior was bizarre. Delisia's friends and family want her home and are asking the public to help. She has not accessed her social media or bank accounts since she disappeared, and her family now fears for her safety. Delisia Wy is described as an African-American female with black hair, hazel eyes, standing 5'1" and weighing 145 pounds. Delisia has the following tattoos: hearts on both sides of her collarbone, leopard spots on one arm and shoulder, Brian on her breast, an anchor on the other breast, and script writing that runs across her abdomen, the name Matria on her wrist, and tattoos on her lower abdomen, hip, and calf. Delisia also has her nose and ears pierced, and some agencies may spell her name Delicia rather than Delecia. She was last seen wearing a black and white tank top, black pants with a white stripe down the leg, a multicolored ball cap, and no shoes. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Monica Fagan of the Caroline County Sheriff's Office at 804-663-1120 or the Hanover County Sheriff's Office at 804-365-6140. Number 6. Leonard Taku. 44-year-old Leonard Taku was last seen on Christmas Day 2006 at the Tampa International Airport in Tampa, Florida. At the time of his disappearance, Leonard was on vacation in Florida from Ramsgate, England, where he worked as a school teacher. Leonard was excited about his vacation and told his colleagues that he would be back on January 3, 2007, to start the school year afresh. Those who knew Leonard said he was kind and outgoing and loved his life and his job. Leonard was last seen at the car rental desk at the airport, where he was attempting to renew his contract for a rented car. He'd been driving a 2005 black Chrysler Crossfire convertible around Florida, and this would have been the third time he would have extended the contract. After leaving the rental desk, Leonard was never seen again, but when his family realized he was missing, there were a few puzzling clues left behind. When Leonard failed to return home to England, his family and colleagues knew something had gone wrong. Leonard was due back on January 3, 2007, and it was unlike Leonard to miss work. His family contacted the authorities in Florida and officially reported him missing. The Altamonte Springs Police Department responded to the report, and the search for Leonard officially began. Leonard was openly gay, and the police appealed to Florida's LGBTQ+ community to help them search for him. Investigators began retracing his steps and found that his credit card had been used on December 26, 2006 at a Gap store. Whoever used the card purchased $46.55 worth of clothes. Now, it's never been confirmed whether this transaction was made by Leonard himself. It was also found that Leonard's emails were accessed on December 28, 2006, but again, investigators have never been able to confirm whether it was actually Leonard or not accessing the account. The trail went cold for a while, and his family desperately waited for updates. Then, on February 9, 2007, they received a call from investigators. The Altamonte Springs police had found the Chrysler Crossfire abandoned deep in the Ocala National Forest, close to the Little Lake George Wilderness area. At the time, the Department of Agriculture was performing a controlled burn, and while the car was unharmed, any evidence that may have been around it was destroyed. With diminished evidence, the police concluded that there was no sign of a struggle, and the car did not hold any clues as to Leonard's whereabouts. Investigators found themselves stuck at square one, and with no clues to work with, the case quickly ran cold. Florida's LGBTQ+ community banded together to help find Leonard, and the community kept a watchful eye out for him. Unfortunately, no sign of Leonard has ever been found. There was one final transaction on his credit card in January of 2007, when a room was purchased at a fancy hotel in Orlando, Florida. Leonard was not known to stay in lavish hotels while traveling, and this is when his family knew that Leonard was probably not the one using the card. It does not appear that the hotel was able to verify who checked in, and if this information is available, police are keeping it close to their chest. Leonard Taku remains missing, and his family and friends in the UK and the US are searching for justice and answers. His family believe that he met with foul play, although investigators have stated there is no evidence to point to this. Leonard Taku is described as a Pacific Islander, has black hair, brown eyes, stands about 5 foot 9 inches tall, and weighs about 175 pounds. Leonard has the following tattoos, some of which are relevant to his Pacific Islander culture: a checkerboard pattern and circles on his upper right arm, solid triangles with lines from his elbow to wrist, also on his right arm, a zigzag pattern from elbow to wrist on his left arm, a tribal design with swirling patterns on his legs running from the knee to the thigh, a Celtic design on his lower back, and Gothic lettering on his upper back. Leonard has a distinctive Kiwi or New Zealand accent and is an active and out member of the LGBTQ+ community. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the Altamonte Springs Police Department at 407-571-8280 and reference case number 2008CJ001125. Number 5, Ronald Gail S. 40-year-old Ronald Gail S. moved from his home in Vallejo to Fresno County in August of 1989 to take a job as an x-ray technician at one of the Fresno County hospitals. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information about Ronald, and the only information available is pertaining to his disappearance. On September 2nd, 1989, Ronald, along with 3 other men, entered the Ansel Adams Wilderness area in Madera County and planned to hike there. Ronald was last seen at around 4:30 p.m., and after that, he became separated from the group as the rough terrain forced them apart. According to a news article from the Times-Herald, the group had planned to camp overnight, and the 3 men headed towards their campsite in the hopes that Ronald would eventually catch up with them. As September 3rd, 1989 rolled around, and there was still no sign of their traveling companion, they reported missing to the Madera County Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department, along with search and rescue crews, searched a 20-square-mile area before calling off the search. Crews were in the air and on the ground, but failed to find any sign of Ronald. Tommy Tomlinson, the Sheriff's Sergeant of Madera County Sheriff's Office, told the Times-Herald, "No signs, evidence, or any of his gear has been found. It's unusual for nothing to be found. There's no evidence of foul play. It doesn't mean it's been ruled out." In the same article, Ronald's sister, Pam Durazo, told reporter Glenn Carty how she planned to still celebrate Ronald's upcoming 41st birthday. She told Glenn, "I've bought him a birthday card already, and I'm not going to let him go." To this day, his family still holds out hope that Ronald will be found and that they can finally get the answers they deserve. His mother, Marcine, believes that Ronald may have had amnesia and may have forgotten who he was. Almost 33 years later, and there's still no sign of Ronald, and it's unlikely that he simply ran away and started a new life, as some have suggested. Ronald is described as a white male with brown hair, green eyes, standing 6 foot tall and weighing 185 pounds. He has a tattoo of a sun with rays, and the Charlie Project notes that he may have suffered from a head injury prior to his disappearance. Ronald was last seen wearing a red and white striped tank top, cut-off Levi jeans, hiking boots, and a straw cowboy hat, and he was carrying a blue backpack with a red sleeping bag. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Louise Paget of the Madera County Sheriff's Office at 559-664-4908 and reference case number 010-181-75. Number 4, Simon Owen. 21-year-old Simon Owen was described as a kind and easygoing young man, and at just 21 years old, the world was his oyster. During term time, Simon lived in Fort Worth, Texas, and attended the Texas Wesleyan University. But during the summers, Simon spent his time in Hawaii with plenty of sun and endless beaches. Hawaii was the perfect place for Simon to relax and earn some extra money for school next year. And in 1994, he went to the islands, but would never come back. In June of that year, 1994, Simon arrived in Hawaii and got himself a job at Chili's restaurant in Waikiki. He was also renting a room and planned to split his time between work and play. Simon was a keen outdoorsman, which made Hawaii the perfect place for him. He loved to climb and hike, and what better place to do it than Hawaii? Simon was seen for the last time on June 29, 1994. After that, he seemed to simply disappear. When his colleagues and family realized he was missing, they reported this to the police, and days later, a large-scale search was in operation. According to an article by the Honolulu Advertiser, billionaire Ross Perot even aided financially in the search by paying for a private helicopter to look for Simon. Volunteers turned out in their hundreds to help search for the promising student, but they only ever found one clue. Days into the search, investigators found Simon's bicycle chained to a tree at the base of Manoa Falls. The search expanded to Manoa Falls, but no sign of Simon has ever been found. Investigators believe that Simon had an accident while out climbing and possibly fell from a considerable height. Simon was well versed in hiking and climbing, but the landscape of Manoa Falls can be unpredictable. The Honolulu Police Department does not believe that foul play is involved in Simon's case. Simon Owen was seen for the last time on June 29, 1994, in Waikiki, Hawaii, and investigators are now seeking information. Simon is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, standing 6 foot tall and weighing 155 pounds. He has the Christian fish symbol tattooed on his right ankle and has scars on the back of his neck, right hip, and left shoulder. When last seen, he was wearing beige shorts and was possibly carrying his maroon backpack. Anyone with any information or who may have spotted the young man is asked to please contact the Honolulu Police Department at 808-529-3111 and reference case number 94-273903. Number 3, Michael Hugh Camilletti. 56-year-old Michael Hugh Camilletti is a retired Army colonel. His time in the Army taught him many valuable survival and outdoor skills. Michael loved to explore the great outdoors, and according to reports, it is believed that he entered the Cranberry Wilderness on May 23, 2011. His family said that it was unlike Michael to go on a hiking trip without telling anyone, and after he failed to return home, he was reported missing. A month later, on June 27, 2011, Michael's car was found abandoned by State Trooper Marka G. The State Trooper found Michael's car abandoned on Williams River Road, and when he checked the license plate, he found it belonged to Michael Camilletti, who had been reported missing weeks earlier. Inside the car was a handwritten note that stated he was planning to hike on the North-South Trail from May 23rd to May 27th. This discovery alarmed officers, and a search of the North-South Trail was conducted, but they were unable to find any evidence of Michael. Scent dogs, search and rescue crews, and volunteers all flocked to the Cranberry Wilderness to aid in the search for Michael. But despite all this, the searchers came up empty-handed. Since then, there's been no sign of Michael, and his family is now looking for answers and closure. Michael Camilletti is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, standing 5 foot 5 inches tall, weighing 165 pounds. He has a scar on his chin. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the West Virginia State Police at 304-799-4101. Number 2, Harold Loris Drake. 76-year-old retired math teacher Harold Loris Drake was enjoying his retirement after dedicating many decades of his life to teaching newer generations. Harold was especially excited to get out and about, and he loved nothing more than hiking, said to be in great physical condition for his age. On July 8, 2015, Harold entered the Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park with a friend, and the two planned on camping and hiking there over the coming days. According to Harold's friend, on July 8th, Harold told him that he was going for a hike and would be back by that afternoon. But as the afternoon came and went, there was no sign of Harold. His friend began to panic. As the hours ticked by and his friend still hadn't returned, Harold's camping companion reported him missing to the Monterey County Sheriff's Department, and a search was underway within a few hours. The Sheriff's Department, along with search and rescue crews, searched throughout the park for Harold, but ultimately found no sign of him. The friend who Harold was camping with told investigators that Harold had left with a gallon of water and some snacks, but it appears that he left his sleeping bag and camping gear behind. Despite searching the Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park, which spans over 1,000 acres, no sign of Harold has ever been located. The most likely theory is that he got lost or injured during his hike and was unable to cry for help. Harold's friends and family have never given up hope that one day they'll find him. Harold Loris Drake is described as a white male with white hair, blue eyes. He stands 5 foot 9 inches tall, weighs 165 pounds, and wears prescription glasses. Harold was last seen wearing a gray shirt, black pants, black suspenders, and hiking boots. Unfortunately, Harold's case has not yet been submitted to NamUs, and no further details are available at this time. Anyone with any information or may have seen Harold that day, please contact the Monterey County Sheriff's Department at 831-755-3722. And number 1, Richard Harvell. 67-year-old Vietnam veteran Richard Harvell and his friends set off into the Mojave Desert in October 2015, hoping to set up camp and eventually hike to the Tehachapi Mountains. When not caring for his family, Richard loved to be outdoors, and his family even joked that he preferred the wilderness to people. On October 15, 2015, tragedy would strike when Richard and his friend were camping at the foot of the Tehachapi Mountains. According to reports, the two were camping in a trailer near 150th Street and Highgate Avenue when the heavens opened up at around 10 p.m. and torrential rains began to pour down. No one could have anticipated just how bad the rains were about to be, and those in Kern County, California, were completely caught off guard. Within minutes, the rains had turned lethal and began to sweep the mud and sand through the Mojave Desert. This flood quickly overwhelmed residents and those hiking in the area, and Richard and his friend were sadly at the epicenter of it. As the rains poured down, Richard went outside the trailer to try and move his car out of the way, and that is when tragedy struck. His friend watched as Richard was hit by a rock and was knocked under the current as his body floated away. With little time to react, his friend desperately tried to grab hold of Richard, but the current was just too strong. Within seconds, Richard had been pulled away from his trailer and he was now missing. His family were understandably devastated when the news hit them, and they vowed to never give up looking for his body. When the rains finally calmed and the flood subsided, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the KCSO Desert Search and Rescue Team took to the skies to try and find Richard. Searches were temporarily suspended due to conditions, but when it was safe to do so, ground teams were also dispatched, but even they were unable to find any sign of the man. The LA Times reported that the Harvell's family also let his dog loose, hoping the animal would be able to locate him. But the dog sat near the trailer for 3 days. It was unfortunately clear that the dog didn't know where to start. Despite wide-scale searches, no sign of Richard has ever been found, but his family still haven't given up hope of closure. He's described as a strong and determined person and a keen survivalist. His family hopes that his Army days and time in the great outdoors might have given him the skills to stay alive and that one day they may be reunited. Richard Harvell is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, standing 5'11" and weighing 185 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Kern County Sheriff's Department at 661-391-7623 and reference case number SR 1527379. Number 10, Michelle Ray Vanek. 35-year-old Michelle Ray Vanek was a dedicated mother to her 4 children who also loved to climb and hike in her spare time. Michelle loved nothing more than being in the great outdoors and soaking in everything nature had to offer. But one climb in 2005 would unfortunately be her last, and ever since then, her whereabouts have been a complete mystery. On September 24, 2005, Michelle, along with her friend Eric Sawyer, geared up to hike up the Mount of the Holy Cross in Colorado. The Mount of the Holy Cross sits at an elevation of around 14,000 feet, and luckily for Michelle, Eric had climbed similar summits numerous times. The pair felt confident in their abilities to navigate whatever the landscape put before them, and they were excited to see how the trip would go. Michelle was a triathlete, but was not experienced in hiking in altitudes. Trust me, from personal experience, altitude is not something to play around with. This hike had been a year in the making, and nothing was going to hold them back. But right from the get-go, there were signs that the trip was doomed. At 6:30 a.m., Michelle and Eric left Half Moon Campground and began their grueling hike up to the summit. Unfortunately, the two had taken the wrong trail and had found themselves on the Halo route. According to reports, the Halo route is much more physically demanding than other trails, and only the most experienced and even professional hikers are advised to take that route. Michelle and Eric had in fact wanted to head along the North Ridge Trail, which had much smoother terrain. Not wanting to reverse and lose their progress, the two continued along the trail and consulted their maps, hoping to find an easier way to the top. Another realization struck the duo when they suddenly remembered that their food and their water purifier had been left behind in Eric's car. With no way of getting off the Halo route, the two were forced to press on and pray that they make it to the top. The two continued on their way, with Michelle regularly complaining of headaches and tiredness, most likely due to the altitude. Michelle found it difficult to keep up with Eric, and soon enough she had begun to lag behind. The high altitude on the ascent had crept up on Michelle. She wasn't used to hiking in such heights. And then, just 400 yards from the summit, Michelle stopped. The altitude, lack of food and water, and the grueling path and the pace had taken its toll on Michelle, and she knew that she had reached her limit, both physically and mentally. Eric wanted Michelle to make the last part of the hike with him and was upset when she suggested that he go it alone. Eric agreed that Michelle could either wait where she was or could start heading toward the East Cross Creek Trail, where the two would eventually meet up later. Disappointed, Eric continued on to the top of Mount of the Holy Cross. This was the last time that Michelle was ever seen alive again. Eric finished the hike, letting out a huge sigh of relief. This trip had been a year in the making, and he was glad that he had finally achieved it. After talking to some other hikers, Eric said goodbye and began his descent. As he neared the agreed waiting spot, he saw that there was no sign of Michelle. He looked around and began shouting for her, but there was no response. Eric's voice echoed through the mountains, and his cries for Michelle went unheard. Eric began retracing his steps and following the trail that would lead him back to his car, but still found no sign of Michelle. When he reached Half Moon Campground and failed to see Michelle, he immediately contacted the Eagle County Sheriff's Office and reported her missing. Within hours, groups of rangers, officers, and helicopter crews were out looking for Michelle. As word of Michelle's disappearance hit the news, the Vail Mountain Search and Rescue Team joined in, and the number of people out looking for Michelle quickly reached the hundreds, making this search and rescue operation the biggest in Colorado's history at the time. Helicopters, ground crews, and scent dogs were all deployed, but no one could find any trace of Michelle. It was as if she had simply vanished off the mountain. And then 2 days later, the Eagle County Sheriff's Office found their first clue. On September 26, 2005, 2 days after Michelle was last seen, searchers came across a duffel bag and a shotgun close to the Cross Creek trailhead. Other hikers also told investigators of a bizarre man who hid behind a tree and refused to show his face. Now, it's unknown whether either or any of these clues are connected to Michelle's case, and there are still more disturbing clues to come. As searchers trudged through the thick snow, they saw something bright. It was blood. It's never been revealed whether this blood was tested to confirm whether it was human or animal, and it appears no DNA tests have been performed on it either. During the entire search for Michelle, over 700 people joined in and spent weeks carefully combing the area of the Mount of the Holy Cross, but there was just no sign of her. No backpack, no shoes, no body, no trace, nothing. Investigators came across another puzzling individual who called himself Peter Martin. Peter was camped out in a tent along one of the trails and was resistant to police questioning. He would not open up and reveal any details about himself, and investigators have never been able to determine whether this elusive Peter Martin is connected in any way to Michelle's case. There are many uncertainties in Michelle's case. Did she meet with foul play during her descent to Half Moon Campground, or did she lose her way due to tiredness and altitude sickness? Investigators believe that Michelle likely became disoriented due to lack of food and water and possibly fell somewhere. But foul play cannot be ruled out in Michelle's case. However, without a body, it's hard to discern. Michelle Vanek was last seen on September 24, 2005, on the Mount of the Holy Cross. She is described as a white female with blonde hair, blue eyes, standing 5'7" tall and weighing about 145 pounds. Michelle was last seen wearing a blue, lightweight ski jacket with white stripes on the sleeves, a black or red shirt, black stretch pants, hiking boots, a blue hat with a white stripe, and blue and white mittens. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Gianni Robinson of the Eagle County Sheriff's Office at 970-328-8682 and reference case number 2005-1969. Number 9, Melvin George Heaps. 74-year-old Melvin George Heaps was described by his family as a warm and loving person who loved to hike anytime he visited them in Salt Lake City, Utah. July 31st, 2017 was no exception, and after visiting his family, Melvin headed out on a day hike to the Crystal Lake area of the Wasatch National Forest in Utah. Melvin was familiar with this area, and his family believed that they would see him later that evening. However, when he failed to return home, they knew something had gone wrong. After failing to return by nightfall, his family reported him missing, and within hours, the Summit County Sheriff's Office and search and rescue teams were out in the Wasatch National Forest looking for him. The search teams were at a disadvantage as Melvin has a hearing impairment, making it unlikely that he would hear them shouting his name. Search and rescuers were dispatched on horseback, by foot and by air, and were also accompanied by dogs, but no sign of Melvin has ever been found. The search continued for Melvin. However, after a few weeks, the search was scaled back due to a lack of leads. Since then, Melvin remains missing, and his family and investigators believe that he likely got lost in the forest. In August of 2017, Melvin's family made a statement to ABC4 News telling them, "Our family appreciates all the support we've received from the search and rescue units and the concern and interest of friends and family. We continue to be hopeful because we know Mel and his love of the outdoors. We respectfully ask for privacy at this time." 74-year-old Melvin George Heaps was last seen on July 31st, 2017, in the Crystal Lake area of the Wasatch National Forest. He is described as a white male with gray hair, blue eyes, stands 5 foot 9 inches tall, and weighs about 180 pounds. Melvin is deaf in his left ear and is hearing impaired in his right, and also wears a hearing aid in his right ear. He has a surgical scar behind his left ear and wears prescription glasses. Melvin was last seen wearing a long-sleeved red or rust-colored shirt with beige stripes, blue jeans, clip-on suspenders, brown hiking boots, a Mormon temple undergarment, and a straw hat with a brown band. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Lieutenant Alan Sidaway of the Summit County Sheriff's Office at 435-615-3600 and reference case number 17-I-19303. Number 8. Scott Allen Hilbert. In 1988, 18-year-old Scott Allen Hilbert was your average teenager. He was also enrolled as a student at Morehead State University in Kentucky, and he was slowly figuring out his way in life. Scott had grown up in Milford, Ohio, and saw the move to Kentucky as a move toward independence and freedom. Like most teenagers his age, he was slowly feeling his way through into adulthood, and things were going pretty well for him. On March 13, 1988, Scott was back home in Milford for spring break, and he was glad to get some time away from his studies. That evening, his parents returned home to find a note on the fridge from Scott that said he was headed out to visit some friends at Ohio State. This university was around 100 miles from their home in Milford, and his parents assumed he would be back in a day or two. However, Scott never returned. When Scott failed to return home or make contact with his parents, they knew something had gone wrong. His parents contacted his friends who said that they had not seen him on March 13th. On March 21st, the Hilberts knew their son had not simply gone away to visit friends. Scott had not returned home and had not returned to college to start the new semester, and that is when the family contacted the Union Township Police and reported their son missing. Investigators would interview Scott's friends and family and confirm that nobody saw him in Ohio State that day. The search for Scott was now on, and it would take almost 2 weeks for the first puzzling clue to surface. On April 1st, 1988, investigators found a black 1984 Ford Tempo with a license plate 807JPF on a dead-end road in the desert in the Beaver Dam Mountain Wilderness area close to the border with Utah. A quick scan of the license plates confirmed that the car belonged to the Hilberts, and Scott's parents confirmed that indeed he had been driving the family car that day. Investigators were now left wondering how had Scott's car ended up over 1,700 miles away. Now, this wasn't the only puzzling clue left behind, though. According to the Charlie Project, quote, "This is," meaning the location where the car was found, 1,700 miles from the Hilberts' home, but the car's odometer showed it had been driven for 3,800 miles since its disappearance. Over 2,000 miles could not be accounted for, end quote. Why had Scott's car been abandoned in a desert in a wilderness area, and who had driven it there? Ohio State University was only around 100 miles from the Hilberts' home in Milford, so why had the car registered almost an additional 4,000 miles? The car had been completely abandoned, and investigators noted that someone had tried to push the car off a cliff. The car didn't go off the cliff as it had been caught on a tree, and a forensic examination of the inside of the car would show more puzzling details. 2 sets of fingerprints were found inside the car. One set of prints belonged to Scott, and the other belonged to an unidentified person. Scott's dorm key, a bottle of shampoo, and a kitchen knife were found scattered around the car, but his other belongings have never been located. There are two more items of interest to investigators. The first is a matchbook from Denver, Colorado, and the second is a page from a Long Beach, California phone book. Are these items related, or is someone trying to leave cryptid clues or maybe even red herrings? Since the discovery of the abandoned vehicle, there's been little movement in Scott's case, and investigators are considering all possibilities at this point. There are endless theories, but without solid evidence, it's impossible to say either way. Scott's family are desperate for answers to what happened to their son and are urging anyone with information to please come forward. Scott's case will likely be solved when the right person with the right information comes forward. Remember, no matter how small or insignificant you think your tip might be, it might just be the missing piece to this bizarre puzzle. Scott Hilbert was last seen on March 13, 1988, and is described as a white male with brown hair and green eyes, standing about 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing 150 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the Union Township Police Department at 513-752-1230 and reference case number 88-000744. Or you can contact the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation at 740-845-2000 and reference their case SI-13-01-01-2211. Number 7. Charles Austin Holman. In May 1978, Charles Austin Holman married the love of his life, Mary Lee Lovelace. The marriage would not last, however, and by 1982, the pair had divorced. Following his divorce, Curtis moved to Montana, where he worked as a math teacher at Target Range Elementary School in Missoula. Curtis was described as an avid outdoorsman, and the Charlie Project notes that he and Mary Lee, his first wife, who we mentioned later divorced, had worked for the National Park Service. Curtis was also into survivalism and was said to have a large stockpile of supplies and food. Now, it wasn't unusual for Curtis to go on long hikes through the wilderness of the U.S., but he always made sure to keep in contact with his family and friends. This all changed, though, on July 22, 1984, when Curtis left his home in Missoula, Montana, and has never been seen or heard from again. His girlfriend at the time later told investigators that Curtis left his home that evening, telling her he was going to change the battery in his truck and then simply never return. The two were due to meet up the next day, but Curtis was a no-show. Now, as previously mentioned, it wasn't unusual for Curtis to go off for long periods of time, but he would always let someone know where he was going, and this time was different. Curtis' girlfriend waited for a call or a letter, but neither of those ever came. It would take 2 weeks for the first bizarre clue in Curtis' disappearance to emerge. On August 3, 1984, a hiker making their way down a desolate road in Placid Lake State Park came across an abandoned 1976 Toyota pickup truck. The hiker knew that this road was disused and contacted the authorities to report the car. A scan of the license plate revealed that the truck belonged to Curtis Holman, and that is when the authorities and his loved ones realized he was indeed missing. The Missoula Police Department attended the scene and immediately began sweeping the area, looking for any sign of Curtis. On the front seat of his truck, investigators found a forest map, his glasses, and his wallet. No keys were found inside the truck, and there was no other sign of Curtis. A wide-scale search of Placid Lake was conducted, with volunteers flooding in to aid with the search. Search and rescue crews combed the forest, but ultimately, no sign of Curtis has ever been found. According to investigators, there was no sign of a struggle, and the only evidence they found of Curtis being in the area were his footprints that had been covered by the prints of a grizzly bear. Now, just a few days after his abandoned truck was discovered, investigators would receive a bizarre tip. Campers at a Girl Scout camp reported seeing a disheveled man who resembled Curtis wandering around the area. According to the scout leader, the man appeared disoriented and was rambling about the Vietnam War. There are no reports that indicate that Curtis ever served in the military, and investigators have never been able to verify this sighting. Since then, there has been little movement in Curtis' case, and investigators believe that he was either attacked by a bear, as a female grizzly was spotted in the area, or that he simply got lost while out hiking and succumbed to the elements. Curtis's brother, though, has his own theory. He believes that the mysterious disappearance of John Patrick Kerrigan is linked to his brother's disappearance. John disappeared on July 20th, 1984 from Ronan, Montana, and his car was found abandoned around 40 miles away from where Curtis's car was found. This theory has never been backed up by investigators, and there's no solid evidence that links the two cases together. Web sleuth users also proposed that Curtis may have been the Sand Canyon John Doe who was discovered in Sand Canyon, Nevada in March of 1992. However, in 2021, the Sand Canyon John Doe was positively identified as Vincent Marion Trapp, who disappeared sometime around 1991. In the years after his disappearance, Curtis was declared deceased in absentia by his family, and now they're looking for answers so they can finally put him to rest. Curtis Austin Holman is described as a white male with blonde or strawberry blonde or reddish hair, blue eyes, standing 6'5" and weighing 210 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the Missoula Police Department at 406-552-6303 and reference case number C-840-708-800. Number 6. Jessie Albertine Hoover. In November 1982, Jessie Albertine Hoover unexpectedly lost her husband and the love of her life, Eugene Hoover. The two had been married for 35 years, and they had shared many precious memories and moments together. The unexpected passing of her beloved knocked Jessie off her feet, but with the help of her children and family, she slowly pulled herself back together and found her fighting spirit once more. Jessie was described as a strong-willed woman who was determined to prove that nothing could hold her back. If Jessie wanted to do something, she was going to do it, and no one could talk her out of it. After the passing of her cherished husband, Jessie began talking to her children about walking the length of the Appalachian Trail after she'd read an article in a magazine. Her children later recalled to Bangor, Maine Daily News how this new mission gave their mother a brighter outlook and something to focus her energy on. Also, according to the Bangor Daily News article, Jessie had crafted an itinerary of when she would arrive at major stops along the trail, pick up supplies, and wire for money. She even made arrangements with the family doctor to get refills of her medication along the way. As we said, Jessie had a fighting spirit, and after months of hard work and preparation, she was ready to tackle the mighty Appalachian Trail. Naturally, her family worried about the trip, but they had come to an agreement that Jessie would call them if she felt like she could no longer carry on. Armed with her supplies, route maps, and itineraries, 53-year-old Jessie Hoover left her home in Fort Worth, Texas, and hopped on a Greyhound bus headed towards Maine on May 16, 1983. Her daughter, Mary Yadon, accompanied her mother to the bus station, and the two said what would be their final goodbyes. A quick kiss on the cheek, and then her mother was gone. Mary watched as the bus rolled out of the station, not knowing that she would never see or hear from her mother again. Jessie did make a few phone calls back home, but after May 20th, 1983, these calls suddenly stopped. According to reports, Jessie attempted to climb Mount Katahdin on May 20th, but was stopped by rangers. These park rangers would tell investigators that they did not let Jessie pass and climb because they believed she was unprepared and would be unable to make it safely up the mountain. Again, Jessie was a strong-willed woman, so she changed up her plans slightly, and she was seen for the last time at the trailhead of the 100-mile wilderness on the Appalachian Trail. At the time of her disappearance, Jessie was only carrying around $15 to $20 in cash and had a limited supply of her epilepsy medicine. Reports also indicate that, strangely, she was only carrying beef jerky, which is nowhere near enough food to sustain a person traversing the 100-mile wilderness area. An attendant at a house located on the trail remembered seeing Jessie and recalled how unprepared she seemed. She was wearing light clothing and not carrying the recommended 8 to 10 days' worth of food. The Bangor Daily News also reported the Texan had stood out to the attendant and felt she was ill-equipped for a stay in the woods. The attendant reportedly had asked her if she had bug spray, but she didn't even have that. This was the first and last time the attendant saw her. When Jessie failed to make contact with her family, they immediately knew something was wrong. Jessie had purchased prepaid AT&T calling cards, so she didn't need to worry about having money to call home. She'd promised to call at least once a week, but now the lines had fallen silent. Jessie's family contacted park rangers. The search team was put together, but even after weeks of arduous searching, no sign of Jessie was ever found. Warden David Sewell, who had been assigned to Jessie's case, told the Bangor Daily News, quote, "We went over the woods with a fine-tooth comb. If she was there, we would have found her. We don't ignore people in the woods," end quote. No pieces of clothing or equipment were ever recovered, and to this day, Jessie's body has also never been found. Investigators believe that Jessie got lost along the trail and simply succumbed to the elements, seeing as how she was unprepared for the landscape and lacked adequate food and clothing. However, Jessie's children and family have never forgotten about her, although almost 40 years have passed since she disappeared. They still hold out hope that there are answers out there. Her children have submitted DNA samples to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Network and are hoping that one day there may be a match. Jessie is described as a white female with gray or partially gray hair, blue eyes, standing about 5 foot 9 inches tall and around 240 pounds. She's missing her 2 bottom teeth and has epilepsy, which she takes medication for. She was last seen wearing a blue windbreaker, blue jeans, and a blue shirt, and was carrying a blue knapsack. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Jennifer Fisk of the Maine State Police at 207-973-3700 and reference case number MC-83-03662. Number 5, Dennis Eugene Johnson. On April 12, 1966, 8-year-old Dennis Eugene Johnson was enjoying a camping trip in the Yellowstone National Park with his mom, dad, and sister. The family had driven from Inyokern, California, to take a relaxing weekend in the park. For Dennis and his younger sister, Yellowstone was the perfect place to run around and explore, seeing what new animals they could see. At first, the trip was going well. The family gathered around their tent, making food and exploring, but then on April 12th, the trip would take an unexpected and tragic turn. That afternoon, the Johnsons gathered their picnic basket and headed for the Cascade picnic area. The basket was filled to the brim with sandwiches, drinks, and snack cakes, but all Dennis and his younger sister wanted to do was explore. While the family were in the picnic area, Dennis' little sister wandered off out of sight of their parents. Dennis was the first to notice that his little sister had wandered off and immediately let his parents know. The family agreed to split up and search different parts of the picnic area. According to reports, Dennis's father was confident in his son's abilities in the outdoors as they had spent time together out there where he had taught him important lessons in survivalism. With that, the 3 split up, hoping to become 4 again. After a while, 3 people emerged from the bushes and into the picnic area, but Dennis wasn't one of them. The Johnsons had their daughter back, but now their son was missing. Once again, they began their search, this time shouting Dennis's name, but he was nowhere to be found. After searching every possible spot, the Johnsons summoned a park ranger and reported their son missing. Over the coming days, park rangers, search and rescue teams, and volunteers would pile into Yellowstone National Park to aid in the search, but no sign of Dennis was ever found. After 2 weeks, the search was scaled back after failing to find any sign of little Dennis. There were no items of clothing, no footprints, and ultimately no Dennis. The lack of footprints or tracks astounded officers, leading them to believe that Dennis may have wandered onto a nearby road and was picked up by an unknown individual. No one has ever come forward with any viable information, and since April 12, 1966, Dennis Johnson has never been seen again. If still alive today, Dennis Eugene Johnson would be 64 years old. At the time of his disappearance, he was described as a white male with sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, standing 3 foot 8 inches tall and weighing 60 pounds. Dennis' nickname was Denny, and he had a 6-inch scar on his abdomen that runs through his navel. He was last seen wearing a dark red or magenta long-sleeve t-shirt, tan Levi's pants, and size 8 laced moccasin-type leather hiking boots with crepe soles. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Daniel Kirshner of the National Park Service at 307-344-2122. Number 4, Brian Christopher Jones. 37-year-old Brian Christopher Jones was last seen climbing the North Sister Mountain in the Three Sisters Wilderness area in Eugene, Oregon on September 24, 2011. Brian and his friend were climbing the North Sister when at around 1 p.m., Brian slipped just short of the summit. Deputy John Miller of the Lane County Sheriff's Office later commented to Oregon Live, quote, "He was scrambling on some of the terrain near his climbing partner, and he slipped, started sliding, and then cartwheeled down the mountain," unquote. Unfortunately, there was nothing his friend could do, and he was forced to watch on as Brian fell down the mountain. The incident was quickly reported to the Lane County Sheriff's Office, but the harsh conditions on the North Sister made it near impossible for helicopter crews to recover Brian's body. Multiple attempts were made, but it appears that so far, search crews have been unable to recover Brian's remains. The friend who hiked with Brian later told newspapers that he called out to him after he heard him slip, but got no response, which is when he began making his way to the nearest ranger station. As Brian has never been recovered, he is still classified as lost/injured and missing, and his family is desperate to find out what happened. Investigators highly believe that Brian perished, but everyone involved would like resolution to this case. If you have any additional information that may help, please contact the Lane County Sheriff's Office, 541-682-4150, and reference case number 11-7087. Number 3, David Christopher Kemper. 27-year-old David Christopher Kemper was last seen in the Sherman Island area in Sacramento County, California. According to the web, Sherman Island is part of Sacramento's regional parks and offers a wide variety of things to do. David and his friend had chosen to head down to Sherman Island to fish, and the park is home to the Sacramento River and the Mayberry Slough, which gave them the perfect resources. There are very few details available in David's case, and all we know for sure is that on March 12, 2018, David and his friend headed down to Sherman Island to do some fishing. Sometime during their trip, the two friends became separated, and that was the last time David was ever seen or heard from. The story has come under heavy fire from David's family, who have publicly stated that David didn't even have a fishing license or own fishing equipment. When he failed to show up for his job as an electrician, his family knew something was wrong, and they contacted the Concord Police Department and reported him missing. At the time of his disappearance, David lived in Concord, and this is why they're the agency in charge of his disappearance. David's friends and family, along with officers, took to the Sherman Island area looking for any signs of David, and just 2 days later, they found their first clue. On March 14, 2018, David's Toyota truck was found abandoned off the 18,400 block of Highway 60. The only items found were David's wool hat and his vest, and nothing else has ever been recovered. Since then, David's case has gone cold, and his family are desperate for justice and answers. David Christopher Kemper is described as a white male with brown hair, brown eyes, standing 6 foot tall, and weighing 160 pounds. He has acne scars on his chest and a range of tattoos. The tattoos are a portrait of his grandmother wearing a red scarf on the right side of his rib cage, a portrait of a woman on his right calf, a full-sleeve tattoo on his left arm, which includes the astrological sign for Virgo, the name Megan on his underarm, an outline of the state of California, a Burning Man logo, a family tree with initials on the inside of his forearms, and the words R.I.P. Joshua Freeman with birds, clouds, and the moon on his bicep. He was reportedly last seen wearing a sweatshirt, a dark blue t-shirt, blue jeans, and a wool hat. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the Concord Police Department at 925-671-3333. Number 2, Patrick E. King. 32-year-old Patrick E. King was last seen on November 21, 1995 in Gibson County, Indiana. According to reports, Patrick left his workplace at around 3:30 p.m. and is assumed that he headed home. Later that night, witnesses recall seeing Patrick get into a gray car with 2 unidentified people. This will be the last time that Patrick was seen alive. Michelle Peters, Patrick's girlfriend, was supposed to be going on a date with him that night, but Patrick never showed. Michelle knew that he had not stood her up, and when he failed to contact her or report for work, she knew something was wrong. It wasn't until his car was found abandoned the next day that Patrick's friends and family knew he was in danger. According to reports, Patrick's 1991 Ford Ranger was found in the Snaky Point Wilderness area near the Patoka River in Indiana. The car had been completely abandoned, and as soon as investigators laid eyes on the car, they knew it was a possible crime scene. In the truck, investigators found human hair, human blood, and fingerprints. All of these signs pointed to a struggle, and now they had to find Patrick. Years later, two men would be ordered to take DNA tests and submit other forensic evidence for comparison as they were being investigated in connection with Patrick's disappearance. However, it does not appear as though anything conclusive came of these tests. Just 8 days after her boyfriend disappeared, Michelle found herself in a perilous situation too. Michelle told police that she was driving along when two men in a gray and black Oldsmobile shot at her and smashed into her car. Thankfully, Michelle was unharmed, but she was left severely shaken by the incident. Investigators have not been able to conclusively link the two incidents together, although we think it's more than fair to say that they are most likely connected. Since 1995, Patrick's case has continued to go cold. The courts of Indiana have subpoenaed DNA samples, fingerprints, and searches of numerous properties, but nothing has ever come of this. There were whisperings around Gibson County that Patrick had been buried underneath someone's garage floor, but again, these claims remain unsubstantiated. In the years following his disappearance, Patrick was declared deceased in absentia, but his loved ones are still yearning for answers. Patrick E. King is described as a white male with long brown hair, a mustache, and a beard. His height and weight are recorded as unknown, as is his eye color. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Brad Cieslak with the Indiana State Police at 800-852-3970 and reference case 35-14390. And number 1, Vladimir Petrovich Kostenko. 41-year-old Vladimir Petrovich Kostenko was a man on a mission. He had moved from Zelenokomusk, Russia, to Washington State with his family as they faced religious persecution in Russia. For his entire time on the planet, Vladimir had been in search of something more. He had a thirst for life and was desperate to understand it. In 2018, Vladimir embarked on another one of his soul-searching hikes, but this time he would never return. Vladimir was dedicated to his spirituality and finding the meaning of life. According to Oregon Live, he lived an almost monk-like existence, fasting regularly, meditating for hours, and reading widely on religion. By the time Vladimir had reached the U.S., he had learned enough English to get by and worked odd jobs as a mechanic to support himself. As he settled into Walla Walla, Washington, he picked up more English and continued his quest for enlightenment. Vladimir was one of 13 children in a devout Christian household, and his siblings recalled that nobody was as spiritual or as devoted as Vlad. In August 2018, Vladimir set out on the 14-mile hike to the Purchase Creek Valley in Hatcher Pass, Alaska. Alaska had been on Vladimir's bucket list, and now he was finally there. He told his friends and family that he was going to stay in a small cabin along the trail for the next few months. Naturally, Vladimir's family were concerned, but their worries were put to bed when he confirmed that the cabin had already been fully stocked. In August, he said goodbye to his family and headed north to Alaska. When he set off on his hike, Vladimir was only carrying a backpack which contained his phone, a power bank with solar recharging capabilities, and 5 pounds of oatmeal. With that, he set off into the wilderness. The first part of the trip went well, and Vladimir thrived in his solitude. From August to October, Vladimir would text his friends and family, and some even stopped by the cabin to see him. However, the messages abruptly stopped in October, and by November, Vladimir's friends knew something had gone wrong. Despite the solitude of the trip, Vladimir had kept in contact with his friends throughout, so when the text messages ended, they knew they had to act. Two of his friends had access to a plane, and they decided to fly over the desolate cabin. Here, they saw Vladimir outside of the cabin, waiting to receive the food and gifts. As the plane circled overhead and headed for Washington once more, they caught a glimpse of Vladimir outside the cabin. This would be the last time he would ever be seen or heard from again. In December, his absence was noted once more, and his friends deployed the same strategy they had used the first time around, but it was of no use. This time, there was no sign of Vladimir. His friends decided to disembark and approach the cabin, and as they grew closer, they realized that the door had been nailed shut with a piece of metal over it. Fearing for their friend's life, the men forced themselves inside, only to find that the cabin was completely empty. The only clue left behind was a message written in Russian that read, frankincense aroma do not burn. His supplies were missing, and there was no trace of Vladimir in the snowy woods outside. His friends looked far and wide and contacted Alaska State Troopers, who sent land and air crews. Despite an extensive search, no sign of Vladimir has ever been found. Vladimir's family believes that he likely succumbed to the elements while hiking. According to the Charlie Project, Vladimir may have been fasting at the time and had arrived at the cabin with very minimal clothing, which was not suited for the Alaskan winter. His family hopes he is now at peace, but still wants to know what happened to him. Vladimir Petrovich Kostenko is described as a white male with brown hair, green eyes, standing 6'1" tall and weighing 145 pounds. Vladimir speaks limited English, with Russian being his mother tongue. He was last seen wearing a light jacket and black jogging bottoms. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the Alaska State Troopers at 907-269-5511 and reference case number AK-180-90660. Number 10, Matthew Charles Kraft. 24-year-old Matthew Charles Kraft will always be remembered by those who knew him and loved him as a kind and caring young man. In 2019, Matthew was an infantry, marine, and platoon leader with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines at Camp Pendleton in California, and he was well liked and respected among his platoon. In February 2019, Matthew took leave from the Marines to complete a 2-week backpacking holiday which would take him along the High Sierra route. According to sources, the route parallels the John Muir Trail, with elevations ranging from 9,000 to 11,500 feet. Matthew had planned to complete the 200-mile hike over 10 days before returning to Bridgeport, California, where he and his group would be deployed to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, Matthew never made it back to base as planned, and the mystery of his disappearance began on February 24, 2019. On that day, Matthew started his 10-day-long journey and had planned to be back by March 4th or 5th. The Orange County Register reports that on February 22nd, Matthew spoke to his father, Greg, for what would be the last time. Greg reported that Matthew was in good spirits, and the two went over Matthew's plans, which included his arrival date on March 4th or 5th. When March 5th rolled around, Matthew's parents and his Marine buddies became concerned that they had not heard from him. But the next day, when Matthew had still not made contact with him, everyone knew something was wrong, and the search for him began in earnest. The search for Matthew was a multi-agency approach with the Mono County Sheriff's Office, the Inyo County Sheriff's Office, the Fresno County Sheriff's Office, and the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Unit all joining the investigation. On March 8, 2019, the gray Jeep Wrangler that Matthew had been renting was discovered near Grays Meadows Campground above Independence, and reports indicate that there was evidence of an avalanche in the area. According to the Orange County Register, the search and rescue effort by Marines from the Mountain Warfare Training Center in Bridgeport and 13 agencies covered an area larger than the state of Rhode Island. Helicopters and ground crews were sent out along the High Sierra route, which runs through parts of the Sequoia and Kings National Parks, along with other wilderness areas. However, no sign of Matthew was found. Heat signals were captured by one of the helicopters. However, this was later discovered to be a hibernating bear. Adverse weather conditions hampered the efforts of search and rescue crews, and heavy snowfall forced the group to suspend their efforts until it was safe to proceed. Despite this huge multi-agency approach, no sign of Matthew has ever been found, and it's believed that he perished while out on the trail. In the wake of his disappearance, the Marine Corps posthumously promoted him to the rank of captain. A memorial service was held for Matthew, with the Marine Corps writing that Matthew Kraft passed away after being overcome by severe winter storms. No sign of Matthew has ever been found, and his family are desperate to find his body and get closure. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the Mono County Coroner at 760-932-7549 and reference case number 19-86. Number 9, Alois Jacob Crost. In 2013, Alois Jacob Crost arrived in the United States to attend a conference, and while he was in the country, he decided to go on a few hikes. Alois worked as a professor at the University of Magdeburg in Germany and was well liked and respected among his colleagues. On August 1, 2013, he headed out to the San Bernardino Mountains in California with a hiking group. The plan was for the group to hike the Pinnacle Trail in the Lake Arrowhead area However, at around 5:45 p.m., Alois became separated from the group. According to reports, Alois was an experienced hiker. However, at the time of his disappearance, he was not carrying any hiking equipment. He was also proficient in hunting, but without the right equipment, the group knew that he would not survive for long. When his absence was noted, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office was notified and began their extensive search for Alois. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office, search and rescue groups, and volunteers scoured the San Bernardino Mountains for Alois, but ultimately no sign of him was ever found. Since October 2013, Alois' case has sat cold, and his family and friends in Germany are desperate for answers. Alois is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, around 5 foot 10 inches tall, and 185 pounds. He speaks fluent English and German and was last seen wearing a long-sleeved light blue button-down shirt, dark blue jeans, and lightweight hiking shoes. The Charlie Project notes that his name may be spelled A-L-O-I-S or A-L-Y-O-F. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Detective Scott Tees of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office at 909-336-0600 and reference case number 051-301-914. Number 8. Vernon Cody Matthews. In June 2014, 23-year-old Vernon Cody Matthews, who went by Cody, was excited to stay at his family's cabin in the lower Sierra Nevada mountains in California. At the time, Cody was an anthropology student, and he was looking forward to spending the summer living off the land and putting to use the techniques he had learned during his studies. In early June 2014, Cody headed down to his family's summer cabin to get a head start on his parents. The agreement was that in a few days, they would join him and they would enjoy their vacation together. However, when his parents, Vern and Cindy, arrived at the cabin, they found it empty. Not only was there no sign of their son, but the cabin had been completely ransacked and around $18,000 worth of items had been stolen. Cody had called them within the first days of his arrival to let them know that the cabin had been broken into and that he planned to secure it in anticipation of their arrival. The MT Democrat reported that a large saw, only capable of being moved by more than one person, was sitting in the driveway. A camera meant to catch wildlife, set up in the front driveway area, was missing. Another security camera's line had been cut. The side of the house had been forcibly opened by bending the locking bar and destroying the door frame. Vern and Cindy knew that something was very wrong. Their cabin had been broken into and ransacked, and now there was no sign of their son. They contacted the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office to report both incidents, and during the initial investigation, the Sheriff's Office did not believe that the two incidents were connected. With Cody now missing, the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office launched a missing person investigation, and it's been reported that Cody was last seen on June 6, 2014. The Charlie Project reports that on that day, Cody left the family cabin to go on a hike, leaving behind most of his personal belongings. Cody had called his mother beforehand to let her know he was going on that short hike and that he would call her later, but sadly, that call never came. Cody only intended to go for a short hike, and as such, the only things he took with him was a water bottle, a hunting knife, a compass, a bag of trail mix, and his phone. Investigators did manage to track Cody's phone, and it last pinged at around 6:30 p.m. that night around the South Fork of the American River. The Democrat later reported that the ping showed him going back in the direction of the cabin before ending in the water. But there is no evidence Cody is in the river or on the banks. Footsteps were found leading out of the river, which were thought to likely be Cody's. Search and rescue teams, volunteers, and the El Dorado Sheriff's Office continued to search the American River and the area around the cabin for 8 days until the search was finally called off. Despite the sheer amount of ground that was covered, no sign of Cody was ever found. Cody's parents noted that he was an experienced hiker and also loved to kayak and canoe, although there is no evidence that Cody went into the river. Just 2 months after Cody's disappearance, the family's cabin burned down during a wildfire that ravaged the area. The perpetrator of the fire was arrested and charged, but investigators do not believe that the fire is linked to Cody's disappearance. Since 2014, Vern and Cindy have been at the forefront of the search for their son, with Vern quitting his job in order to dedicate himself to the investigation full-time. In a 2014 interview, Vern told the Democrat, "With his skills and knowledge of the backcountry, the chance of him, with his skills and knowledge of the backcountry, the chance of him not being able to thrive is slim. Vernon Cody Matthews is still missing, and his family needs your help. Cody is described as a white male with blonde hair, a reddish beard, blue eyes, standing 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighing 220 pounds. He has a slight scar on the left side of his nostril and was last seen wearing shorts, no t-shirt, and toe shoes or barefoot style shoes that leave a footprint. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office at 530-621-6600 and reference case number 14-052327. Number 7. Terry J. Metter. On October 19, 2018, Terry Metter headed out on a solo hiking trip in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and has never been seen or heard from again. There are scant few details in Terry's case, and it has been reported that Terry had previously been hospitalized for psychiatric intervention but was taking medication for the bipolar disorder he suffered and was stable at the time of his disappearance. Terry was known to go off into the wilderness alone to hike and hunt, but when he failed to return home or make contact by October 25, 2018, his family reported him missing. Shortly after he was reported missing, his 2013 Chevrolet pickup truck was found abandoned on an access road 2 3/4 miles from the summit of Pine Mountain in Sweetwater County, Wyoming. According to the Cowboy State Daily, it was found high-centered in a large rut with Terry's rifle, binoculars, hunting license, and a small cooler containing a couple of bottles of water and a can of soda, along with some other snacks still inside. The driver's window was found rolled down to allow Terry to presumably climb out of the vehicle, given the steep angle of the truck. The Cowboy State Daily also wrote that dried mud inside the vehicle and on a shovel tossed in the back of the truck indicated that Terry had attempted and failed to dig his truck out of the rut. Investigators found footprints leading away from the truck and onto an access road. However, these prints mysteriously stopped. A half-smoked cigarette was also found, with Terry's son confirming that it was the brand that his father smoked. It appears that DNA testing was performed on the cigarette. However, the results came back inconclusive. A wide-scale search showed no clues, and on November 14, 2018, the search was officially called off. The Sweetwater County Search and Rescue, Tip Top Search and Rescue, the University of Utah Air Med, dog units, volunteers, and the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office all turned out to help in the search for Terry, but no sign of him has ever been found. His family do not believe that he left of his own volition, and assured investigators that he was stable at the time of his disappearance. Terry had previously confided in friends that he would like his life to end on his terms, and that he would like to do it alone, but there were no indications that Terry wanted to take his own life at the time of his disappearance. His family are still desperately seeking answers and are appealing to anyone with information to please come forward. Terry J. Metter is described as a white male with gray hair, blue eyes, standing 5 foot 10 inches tall, and weighing 180 pounds. Terry requires medication for his bipolar disorder, and he's previously been hospitalized as a result of this condition. Terry is known to smoke cigarettes and was last seen wearing an orange jacket. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Matthew Wharton of the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office at 307-922-5300 and reference case numbers S18-18538 and R18-32089. Number 6. Ralph Allen Newcomb. On April 17, 1989, Ralph Newcomb kissed his wife goodbye as she headed out the door of their Seattle, Washington home. She had no idea this would be the last time she would ever see or hear from her husband, and when she returned home later that night, he was gone. There are very few details available in Ralph's case, but what we do know is that in 1988, he moved from Kodiak, Alaska to Seattle, Washington to set up his business. In Alaska, Ralph worked as a carpenter and somewhat of a house flipper, and had also attended college in Alaska. After realizing that her husband had disappeared, Ms. Newcomb reported him missing to the King County Sheriff's Office, and on April 18, 1989, Ralph's red and white Ford 300 Series truck, Washington plate A69514, was found abandoned across the road from the Alaska Ferry Terminal in Seattle. Inside the truck were his tools, wallet, and ID. According to the Charlie Project, Ralph had left both his glasses and contact lenses at home, along with an uncashed check. Since April of 1989, Ralph has never made contact with his family or friends, and they are desperate to find out what happened to him. Many believe that Ralph simply walked away and started a new life, and according to the Charlie Project, there are indications that Ralph was in Wyoming and Montana after his disappearance. Ralph also has connections to Missouri, and that is where he grew up, and Illinois as he attended Southern Illinois University. His wife, family, and friends are desperate to hear from him or hear any news as to what happened to him all those years ago. Ralph is described as a white male with brown hair, a full beard, blue eyes. He stands 5'11" tall and weighs 170 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Detective Jim Allen of the King County Sheriff's Office at 206-296-4155 and reference case number 89-096850. Number 5. Charles Edwin Palmer. In June 1999, the Palmer family were blindsided by tragedy when their 15-year-old son, Michael, mysteriously disappeared after attending a graduation party near Meadow Lake in Wasilla, Alaska. The disappearance of Michael hit the family hard, including his older brother, Charles Chucky Palmer. The family did the best they could to find Michael, but then they had to move on without him. Just 11 years after Michael Palmer disappeared, the Palmer family would find themselves facing a similar scenario when Chucky also disappeared. Since then, the Palmer family have been fighting for justice and answers for their two beloved sons. Chucky was one of 5 children, with his older brother Chris and younger brother Michael, who was also the youngest child. By 2010, Chucky was a father himself to 3 children and was working towards securing a bright future for them. April 10th of 2010, though, would be the day that the lives of the Palmers would be turned upside down yet again. On April 10th, Chucky, Chris, their stepfather, and 2 friends headed out to the Talkeetna Mountains. The group of fellows had planned to ride their snowmobiles through the thick blankets of snow that had fallen and also do some camping and hunting. The boys' trip was the perfect break for Chucky, and he was looking forward to being out in nature once more. The men piled into a cabin near Sheep Creek and began their snowmobiling adventures. Unfortunately, just hours into the trip, the handlebar on Chucky's snowmobile snapped, which forced him to use a different one. This change of equipment didn't spoil their fun, and after acquainting himself with a new snowmobile, the group quickly rode off into the distance. Chucky was seen by the group for the last time at 7:15 p.m. According to those with him that day, he was at the back of the group and took a wrong turn, which separated him from the rest. When they realized that Chucky was missing, it was already too late, and he had driven off along the wrong track on his snowmobile. The group hoped that Chucky would find his way back to the cabin, but as the morning sun rose and there was still no sign of him, they called the Alaska State Troopers and reported him missing. The Palmers now had 2 members of their family who had disappeared into the wilderness. A search was coordinated by the Alaska State Troopers and local search and rescue teams, and shortly after Chucky was reported missing, the Alaska State Troopers found his snowmobile. The vehicle was several miles away from the cabin at Sheep Creek and had been covered with several feet of snow. There was no sign of Chucky and no footprints in the snow, and the fact that there were no tracks or footprints deeply puzzled investigators. So where was Chucky? He was dressed appropriately for the weather, but had no food or water with him and no GPS personal locator device. Despite a wide-scale search that was eventually called off due to bad weather, no sign of Chucky has ever been found. With no tracks or footprints to suggest where he may have been headed, his family has since had him declared deceased in absentia. His family are desperate to find out what happened to Chucky and are appealing to anyone with information to please come forward. Charles Chucky Edwin Palmer is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, standing approximately 5'11" tall and weighing about 150 pounds. He was last seen wearing a black Gore-Tex jacket and vest, black snow pants, black boots, and a black snowboarding helmet. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Melia Miller of the Alaska State Troopers at 907-269-5511 and reference case number 100029-713. Number 4, Timothy Vern Perryman. In late 2002, Timothy Vern Perryman's world fell down around him after he lost his job as a financial analyst. Timothy had obtained his degree in business administration years earlier and had worked incredibly hard to establish his career. By early 2004, however, the shock and depression of losing his job were in full swing. For now, the 53-year-old and the lives of the Perrymans would be further turned upside down on one March day. March 28, 2004, Timothy left his home at around 2 p.m. on the 29,000 block of Garden Oak Court apartment in Agora Hills, California. That day, he and his wife got into an argument, and it's unclear whether Timothy left during the argument or after. His neighbors recalled seeing him walking briskly south along Daylight Drive, and that was the last time he was ever seen. When he failed to return home later that day, his wife reported him missing to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. The concern for Timothy's welfare grew as time went by, with his family and authorities fearing that he may have harmed himself. Reports indicate that he took his driver's license and some photographs when he left the house, leaving behind his Social Security card, automobile, medicine, phone, credit cards, and cash. Timothy's son, Steve, later told the LA Times he's a very methodical man who thinks things through clearly before doing them. It's pretty scary. Timothy had served as a Boy Scout leader for over 18 years, which meant he was adept at surviving in the great outdoors. He had many hunting, hiking, and survival skills up his sleeve, and his son believes that he likely headed to the Santa Monica Mountains to go for a hike. Timothy enjoyed hiking, and his son theorized that his father went to the mountains to take such a hike to clear his mind. Multiple searches have been conducted, however, but no sign of Timothy has ever been found. His family does not believe that he would abandon them, and his wife confirmed that the argument that day was only minor. Timothy Perryman is still missing, and his family is desperate to find out what happened to him. Timothy was last seen on March 28, 2004 at around 2 p.m. as described as a white male with brown hair, hazel eyes, standing 5 foot 9 inches tall and weighing 185 pounds. Timothy has scars from skin grafts on the side of his nose and behind his left ear, and a red and purple port wine birthmark on the left side of his face from his eyebrow to his upper lip, and he also wears prescription glasses. He depends on medication to manage his conditions, and at the time of his disappearance was suffering from chronic heart, urinary tract, and kidney problems. According to the Charlie Project, his kidneys were infected and he was undergoing tests to see if he was suffering from prostate cancer. Without his medication, Timothy could become seriously ill or even die. He may have also been depressed at the time of his disappearance. Timothy was last seen wearing a blue and white striped long-sleeve polo Oxford dress shirt, blue jeans, white tennis shoes, and a gold Seiko watch. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Detective Tamar Abram of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department at 323-890-5500 and reference case 04-018-9022. Number 3, Shannon Joy Shell. 34-year-old Shannon Joy Shell was determined to hike the Tanque Verde Ridge Trail to Manning Camp in Saguaro National Monument East in Arizona. She had previously tried to hike this rugged terrain but had failed and had her sights set on finishing what she started. The trail was over 32 miles long and covered some rough and rugged terrain, but Sharon was an experienced hiker and knew that she would be able to push through her limit and make it. On October 12, 1994, Shannon parked her Camaro at the trailhead, grabbed her hiking bag, which contained water bottles, snacks, clothes, cigarettes, lip gloss, and some cough drops, and headed out on her way. At the time of the hike, Shannon was recovering from the flu, and despite the advice of those around her, she decided to push through the pain and discomfort. Unfortunately, Shannon never made it to Manning Camp, and when she failed to return to her parents' home in Tucson, Arizona, she was reported missing to the Pima County Sheriff's Office. The Pima County Sheriff's Office and search and rescue crews headed out into the Saguaro National Monument East in search of Shannon, but they failed to find her. All they found was a fire ring 6 miles from the trailhead and a few footprints. Investigators were never able to confirm whether this fire or footprints belonged to Shannon. This was the only pieces of evidence they found in their search, and after failing to find her, the search was eventually called off. In 2014, Bob Love, Chief Ranger of Saguaro National Park at the time, spoke to Tucson.com telling them Shannon's intent was to go to Manning Camp, which is a significant hike, It's very steep terrain. The 15 miles of trail to Manning Camp would have been a challenge for even experienced hikers. Shannon wouldn't have been able to do the round trip in one day. Dehydration and exposure are risks even in the cooler months, including October. Hikers can underestimate the amount of water they need and the extra clothing they should carry when the weather is temperate. Since October, Shannon's family have been desperately searching for her, and as of yet, there is no sign of her. Shannon Joy Shell is described as a white female with brown hair, hazel eyes, standing 4 foot 9 inches tall and weighing approximately 85 pounds. Shannon was recovering from the flu at the time of her disappearance and also suffers from bronchitis. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact David Sedlak of the Pima County Sheriff's Office at 520-351-4600 and reference case number 941-013-016. Number 2, Teresa Schmidt. 53-year-old Teresa Schmidt was last seen on September 6, 2002, near the Lost Valley Guest Ranch, which, according to their website, is surrounded by the Rocky Mountains. Teresa was visiting the ranch with her husband, and on September 6, 2002, she decided to go on a day hike while her husband attended a conference. Witnesses recall seeing Teresa at around 3 p.m. that day on a trail that leads to Rocky Overlook east of the Guest Ranch. Teresa and her husband had traveled from Avon, Indiana to Jefferson County, Colorado, so that Mr. Schmidt could attend a medical conference. When he returned to the Guest Ranch after the conference, he found no sign of his wife and immediately reported her missing. There is a lack of information in Teresa's case, and it's reported by the Charlie Project that while she was reported missing on the evening of September 6, 2002, the search for her did not commence until 2 a.m. on September 7, 2002. Over the coming days, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, search and rescue personnel, scent dogs, and volunteers scoured the area surrounding the Lost Valley Guest Ranch, but ultimately failed to find any sign of Teresa. Since September 2002, Teresa's case has been cold, and it's believed she likely got lost while hiking. 2 sets of her footprints were found near Cheeseman Overlook on each side of the ridge, but nothing else was ever found. Her family are still seeking answers and closure and are appealing for anyone with any information to please come forward. Teresa Schmidt is described as a white female with blonde hair, brown eyes, standing 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighing 125 pounds. She was last seen wearing a turquoise windbreaker, a light-colored t-shirt, stone-washed jeans, and a black fanny pack. She was also carrying a backpack which contained a heavier jacket and 2 bottles of water. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Jennifer Jones of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office at 303-271-5195 and reference case number 02-22973. And number 1, Robert Dwayne Scott. 63-year-old Robert Dwayne Scott was last seen in Grand Junction, Colorado on July 30, 2002. According to authorities, Robert took a 9mm handgun with him and left behind a note that outlined his intentions to harm himself. Once this note was discovered, Robert's disappearance was reported to the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, who launched an official investigation. Shortly after Robert disappeared, his white 1995 Chevrolet pickup truck was found abandoned at the Flat Tops Wilderness area in Garfield County, Colorado. There was no sign of Robert, and the case went cold until August 16, 2002, when the Post-Independent reported that searchers had found his black backpack along the short trail between Jet Lake and the trailhead. According to reports, the only thing missing from the bag was a float tube, and Robert's family confirmed that he enjoyed fishing and hunting in that area. Multiple agencies joined in the search for Robert, with the Post-Independent reporting that agencies from Garfield County, Mesa County, Delta County, Crested Butte, Eagle County, Aspen, and Grand County assisted in the search. These teams brought helicopters, dog units, ground searchers, and even cavers to help find Robert. However, no sign of him was ever detected. Robert Dwayne Scott is considered endangered missing, and his family are desperate for closure. Robert was described as a white male with blonde, strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, standing 6 foot tall and weighing 160 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Danny Norris of the Mesa County Sheriff's Office at 970-244-3500 and reference case 02L6537. David Douglas Boone. In the late 1990s, David Douglas Boone enjoyed success through his job as a golf club designer. David worked for Lynx, a company that supplied some of the world's greatest golf players with clubs, and as a result, David and his family lived a comfortable life. Unfortunately, in 1998, the company went out of business, forcing David to move on to another company. He quickly rose through the ranks at Zevo Golf. They too would follow the path of liquidation and bankruptcy. To top it all off, David was in the midst of a divorce from his wife Terry, and the two now had to decide the custody agreement of their 4 children. Fast forward to 2006, David was now 56 years old, and he and Terry maintained a good relationship following their divorce. David found employment with yet another golf club manufacturer, and things had seemed to calm down for him. That's not to say that David wasn't under a lot of stress, but the stresses of being in a company that was liquidating were well behind him. Despite their divorce, David and Terry were on good terms, and the two would regularly catch up with each other and take care of their children together. In 2006, David was living in the 26,000 block of Town Center Drive, Lake Forest, California, in an apartment he shared with his youngest son, Davis, who was 17 at the time. On December 5th, 2006, David was last seen leaving his home between 2 or 3 p.m., and this will be the last time he was ever seen or heard from again. When his father failed to return home that evening, Davis, David's youngest son, called his mother Terry and his brothers. The family huddled into the apartment that the father and son shared and desperately tried to call him and locate him. David had left behind his credit card, ID, wallet, phone, car, and mountain bike. His family believed that he had likely headed out to the Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park for a hike to clear his head. This was a spot that David knew and loved, so his sons hopped onto their mountain bikes and began riding through the trails looking for their father, but there was no sign of him. On Wednesday, December 6th, David's family contacted the Orange County Sheriff's Department and reported him missing. The OC Sheriff's Department did not begin its search until December 8, 2006. Orange County Sheriff's Department spokesman Jim Amormino told the LA Times, quote, "We initially thought maybe he's under stress and needed to get away. We get many calls a day like that, quite honestly. But the more we kept talking to his wife and the kids, we thought, wow, he's had 2 days to come home. Usually in these situations, it's 1, 2, 3 days, and they come back home to make contact." End quote. On December 8, 2006, it was clear that David was in trouble. The Orange County Sheriff's Department finally assembled a team to look for him. Over the next coming days, David's sons, his friends and family, and the OC Sheriff's Department combed the Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park and surrounding areas, but no sign of David was ever found. Officers were deployed on foot and in the air, but these officers failed to locate him. The only trace of David was found by bloodhounds who tracked his scent from his home on Town Center Drive 4 miles into the Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park. Despite extensive efforts, no sign of David has ever been found, and his family are desperate to find out what happened to him. Terry Boone, David's estranged wife, along with David's 4 sons, have been the driving force behind his case. His family pushed the Orange County Sheriff's Department to investigate and also went to great lengths to get his case out there. Terry and the kids would visit local businesses and place flyers around town, hoping that someone knew something. Now, there are theories out there that speculate that David was eaten by a mountain lion or another big creature that stalks the park. While other hikers have been attacked by animals in the Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park, there's no evidence to suggest this is what happened to David. Again, David's family are desperate for answers and are appealing to anyone with information to come forward. David Douglas Boone was last seen on December 5, 2006, and was believed to have headed into the Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park, an area he was extremely familiar with. He is described as a white male with graying-brown hair, blue eyes, standing approximately 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighing about 220 pounds. David is missing a tooth in the middle right side of his mouth. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Orange County Sheriff's Department at 714-647-7000 and reference case number 06-235798. Alan Clarence Theus. 52-year-old Alan Clarence Theus was last seen on November 22, 2003, while vacationing in Lewiston, Minnesota. Alan had traveled from Montana, and according to reports, he had planned on hiking and hunting in the upper Missouri River Breaks area. According to the few reports out there about Alan's disappearance, he previously lived in the upper Missouri River Breaks area and had moved back to Montana to pursue his hunting. He also worked for a global positioning company, which enabled him to move throughout the country while getting paid. Those who knew Allen described him as hardworking and dependable, and shortly before leaving Montana for Minnesota, Allen told his mother he would be back by the end of November. Allen's absence was first noted on November 24, 2003, when the motel that Allen had been staying in noticed he had failed to check out of his room. Allen never settled his bill, and after this, the motel staff alerted the Fergus County Sheriff's Office on November 26, 2003. The Fergus County Sheriff's Office entered the room that Allen had been staying in to find that most of his clothes and personal items were still in the room. When he left, Allen had taken only his hunting clothes and his rifle. Law enforcement opened their investigation and began their search for Allen right away. The Sheriff's Office, along with search and rescue personnel, scoured the area for Allen, and within hours they found the first clue. A crew flying over the area found Allen's abandoned truck near the Stafford Ferry on the Missouri River. Inside the truck were a pair of boots and an empty rifle case. There was no sign of Allen in or around the truck, and to this day, this remains the only piece of evidence found in his case. By December 7, 2003, the search had been temporarily halted due to poor weather conditions. The Billings Gazette reported there was, quote, heavy snow and gumbo mud that made the area too treacherous to continue the search, end quote. Despite extensive searches, Allen Theus has never been located, and in 2011, his family had him declared deceased in absentia. Allen Clarence Theus is described as a white male with gray hair, hazel eyes, standing 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighing 160 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Fergus County Sheriff's Office at 406-535-3415. Next, Timmy Gene Thompson. 36-year-old Timmy Gene Thompson left his home on the 5000 block of Hess Road off Highway 138 in Phelan, California, for the last time on August 3, 2002. Reports indicate that Timmy was heading out on a hiking trip with the Charlie Project, noting that he was likely headed to the Salton Sea area on the Colorado Aqueduct to the Colorado River. The hiking trip was only supposed to be for 3 days, but when Timmy, known to his friends as Tim, failed to turn up for work or make contact with his family, they knew something had gone wrong. Tim had a houseboat in the Park Moabi area that he frequently liked to visit, and it appears that he had planned to hike through Salton Sea before reaching his houseboat. Unfortunately, Tim never made it to his destination nor back home, and his friends and family knew something had gone wrong. Tim was a dependable person, and the fact that he just dropped off the map sent alarm bells ringing for his friends and family. Tim was reported missing when he failed to return home, and it wouldn't be until September 23, 2002, that investigators with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office would stumble upon their first clue. On that day, searchers found Tim's light golden brown 1986 Buick Skylark abandoned on a road 4 miles away from Highway 177 on Phelan Pass Road. According to NamUs, investigators found a campsite 3 miles east of the car, and at the campsite was a full beer can, a packet of unopened cigarettes, and Tim's knife. In the days before his disappearance, Tim had quit his job, but he seemed happy within himself. His mother, whom he lived with, reported that her son was in good spirits and showed no signs of wanting to take his own life. The days leading up to his disappearance were mundane, and there were no signs of what was to come. Since 2002, Tim's case has run cold, and investigators are desperate to solve it. Timmy Tim Gene Thompson was last seen on August 3, 2002, near his home in Phelan, California. He is described as a white male with brown hair, might have a beard, has brown eyes, stands 5 foot 9 inches tall, and weighs about 180 pounds. Tim has a tattoo of a California brown bear on the back of his left shoulder. He was possibly last seen wearing a brown button-down shirt, Levi blue jeans, and brown lace-up work boots. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact Detective Joe Janowitz or Detective Michelle Brand of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department at 760-552-6833 and reference case number 0702-03474. Now we have Tyler Joel Christensen. 16-year-old Tyler Joel Christensen was a bright and sprightly teenager who was dedicated to his faith and his education. Tyler lived with his parents and 4 sisters in Snohomish County, Washington, and by all accounts, he was a regular teenage boy. When not working hard toward his grades, Tyler would often attend youth meetings at his local church or simply relax with friends. However, the lives of the Christensen family would be turned upside down one tragic day in April of 2016. Tyler was seen for the last time on April 19, 2016, in the 5300 block of Picnic Point Road in Edmonds, Washington. It was around 6:30 p.m., and his parents reported that he had told them he was going for a jog before heading on to the youth meeting at the church, but Tyler never arrived. When the meeting drew to a close and the church's youth returned to their respective homes, Tyler's parents began to worry. He was a dependable young man who would let them know if he'd planned to be out late. Hours had passed since the Christensens had last seen their son, and panic began to set in. So they picked up the phone and contacted the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. Officers were sent to the Christensen home in Mukilteo, and an investigation was opened immediately. However, officers initially declared that Tyler was a runaway, not a missing person, and stuck by their initial thoughts on the case. Officers were insistent that Tyler had left of his own accord, and a witness sighting days later would only affirm this in their minds. When Tyler's disappearance was publicized, thanks to the efforts of his family, a witness came forward and told investigators that he had picked up a young man who bore a strong resemblance to Tyler. This witness claimed that Tyler had been hitchhiking and was heading towards Shelton and the Olympic National Park area. Investigators also believed that Tyler had taken a ferry from Kingston in order to reach the park. According to this witness, Tyler was happy and upbeat and seemed excited about going hiking in the Olympic National Park. Investigators had never been able to conclusively prove that the person seen hitchhiking that day was in fact Tyler, however. In May 2016, the backpack he was carrying the day he disappeared was found near the High Steel Bridge near Shelton, Washington. Still inside were emergency blankets, clothing, and food. Since this lead, Tyler's case has gone cold, and now the family are fighting to keep his name in the media. His family have a Facebook page dedicated to his case and have put up flyers and posters all around town. Investigators believe that Tyler had made plans to run away and likely became injured while out in the wilderness. But, according to Tyler's family, there were no issues in the home and Tyler was as bright and happy as ever. His family is now desperate for answers and is asking anyone with information to come forward. Tyler Joel Christensen is described as a white male with light brown hair, blue eyes, standing 5'11" and weighing 145 pounds. He has a half-inch scar on his left ankle and was last seen wearing a light blue shirt and dark blue shorts. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Detective Rich Emmons of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office at 425-388-3839. Next up, Wallace Wilkinson Dunn. 81-year-old Wallace Wilkinson Dunn was last seen on July 12, 2013 at around 11 a.m. in Anchorage, Alaska. Wallace had dedicated his life to his patients in Anchorage and had worked as a doctor for 4 decades. He quickly became a well-known and well-liked figure within the community, and when it was time for his retirement, everyone was pleased that Wallace could now get a well-deserved break. On July 11, 2013, Wallace attended a football game in Waldron Lake with family members. As the family members parted ways, they had no idea that it was the last time they would ever see Wallace. The next confirmed eyewitness sighting of Wallace was made the next day on July 12, 2013, in Anchorage. Wallace was reported missing on July 16, 2013, when he failed to make contact with his family. In the days before his disappearance, he told his family that he wanted to make the most of the sunshine and was going to his cabin in Big Lake. The Anchorage PD received the missing person report and began searching for Wallace immediately. In the days following his disappearance, Wallace's gray Ford F-150 truck was found abandoned at the end of West Susitna Parkway. Inside was his shotgun, a container of now-spoiled food, a chainsaw, and a generator. There was no sign of Wallace, and the search radius expanded. According to Frontiersman.com, quote, multiple agencies, including Matsu Search and Rescue, search dogs, and a Hello 2 team joined in the search for Wallace, end quote. Despite these extensive searches, no sign of Wallace was ever found. Wallace's disappearance hit the local news, and then days after his disappearance, a bizarre tip came in to the Alaska State Troopers. Witnesses had reported seeing a man fitting Wallace's description at the Montana Creek campground in Alaska on July 13. This man told the witnesses that he planned to either walk or hitchhike to the Denali National Park. Now, investigators have been unable to verify these sightings, and are appealing to anyone with any information to please come forward. Since 2013, there have been very few updates on Wallace's case, and his family told investigators and the media that it is extremely out of character for Wallace to leave without notice. Wallace Wilkinson Dunn was last seen on July 12, 2013 in Anchorage, Alaska. He is described as a white male with white hair, blue eyes, standing about 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighing around 160 pounds. Wallace has large, distinctive freckles on his face and walks with a shuffling gait in slow steps. Wallace was also showing early signs of Alzheimer's disease, which affected his memory and physical abilities. Anyone with any information is asked to contact Melia Miller of the Alaska State Troopers at 907-269-5511 and reference case number AK 130-51623. And now, James Taylor Wall. 33-year-old James Taylor Wall was last seen on January 25, 2015. There are extremely few details available in James' case, and even the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency Community Information Center website is lacking any background detail about him. According to the few reports that are out there, James' mother was informed that he might have been involved in a serious altercation at the time of his disappearance, but exactly what happened and with who remain a mystery. He was last seen at his home on County Road 2 in Double Springs, Alabama on January 25th. He walked out of his home, said goodbye to his loved ones, and simply never returned. This case has continued to baffle investigators and loved ones alike, and nothing makes sense at all. It appears that James left his home in Double Springs and was headed for the Bankhead National Forest. This is where the information stops and the leads dry up. James Taylor Wall is still missing and is considered to be an endangered missing person. He is described as a white male with sandy blonde hair, blue eyes, standing 5 foot tall and 150 pounds. James has the following tattoos: a sleeve from wrist to elbow on his right arm, a tribal symbol on his right upper arm, a dragon on his back, and the name Haley on the left side of his chest. He was last seen wearing a yellow John Deere t-shirt and camo shorts. Anyone with information is asked to please contact Billy Holland of the Winston County Sheriff's Office at 205-489-8765 and reference case number 201-501-000-325. Next up, Michael Hugh Camilletti. 56-year-old Michael Hugh Camilletti was a retired Army colonel who loved nothing more than being in the great outdoors. Michael's family knew that if he was unreachable, he was likely out hiking or caving, and that he would be back home safely soon. Michael was last seen on May 22, 2014. Although the Charlie Project reports 2011, that appears to be a clerical error. Michael was last seen on May 22, 2014, at his home in Standardsville, Virginia. His family knew that if they couldn't reach him, he was likely out hiking, but as June 2014 came around, his family began to get an uneasy feeling. Michael was prone to leaving for trips without notice, but now almost a month had passed without any contact. His brother reported missing on June 12, 2014, and the Greene County Sheriff's Office began their search shortly after. Investigators have stated that they believe Michael went to the Cranberry Wilderness in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. On June 27, 2014, state troopers came across Michael's car, and after running the license plates, they discovered it belonged to this missing man. When they searched the car, they found a handwritten note from Michael stating that between May 23, 2014 and May 27, 2014, he planned to hike the North-South Trail. The state troopers, along with the Greene County Sheriff's Office and other various search and rescue teams, began the search for Michael in the Cranberry Wilderness, which spans 47,815 acres. However, the search for Michael proved fruitless, and after searching high and low for him, the search was eventually called off. To this day, no sign of Michael has ever been found, and his family are desperate to find out the truth. Michael Hugh Camilletti is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, standing 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighing 165 pounds. He has a distinctive scar on his chin. Anyone with information is asked to please contact the Greene County Sheriff's Office at 434-985-2222 and reference case number 2011-016317. And now we have Rosemary Teresa Kunst. In 1999, 69-year-old Rosemary Kunst and her husband, Bud, were involved in a serious car accident which took Bud's life. Rosemary miraculously survived, but was left with serious injuries. In the midst of losing her beloved husband and dealing with the recovery from her injuries, Rosemary decided she wanted to try a different approach. She loved being outdoors and enjoyed hiking and being one with nature, so she decided to join the Earth Circle Association in the Marble Mountains Wilderness in the Klamath National Forest in California. The group was led by a Native American elder, Charlie Redhawk, and Rosemary hoped that the backpacking trip and spiritual retreat would help soothe her aching heart and body. On August 17, 2000, Charlie, the Earth Circle Association leader, along with Rosemary, now 70, and 19 other people headed into the Klamath National Forest, bound for an area called Woolly Creek. According to reports, this area is considered to contain some of California's harshest terrain and is not a forgiving trail to Spirit Lake, where the group held their ceremonies and meetings. Despite her injuries, Rosemary carried on with the group, and within hours they had completed the 12-mile hike to Spirit Lake. The group set up their tents and cooking equipment and spent the rest of the day engaging in spiritual activities led by Charlie. The next morning, Charlie informed the group that he was headed off on a day hike, and the members grabbed their bags and headed out with him. However, Rosemary decided that she wanted to stay behind, and just hours later, she would mysteriously disappear from Spirit Lake. Soon after Charlie and the group had left for a day hike, Rosemary told Charlie's son that she wanted to go on a smaller hike to the other side of Spirit Lake, but he didn't want to join her, so she went alone. Rosemary walked away from the campground carrying nothing more than a sandwich, some trail mix, and her journal. Unfortunately, this was the last time that Rosemary would ever be seen or heard from again. The trail which Rosemary would have taken was on a hillside with a 70-degree angle and very difficult terrain. When Rosemary failed to return hours later, the group began their own search for her. When this search was unsuccessful, they contacted the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department and reported Rosemary missing. The Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department was assisted by the National Guard and search and rescue crews, but they failed to find any sign of her. A helicopter with a thermal imaging camera, scent dogs, and officers on horseback were also deployed, but they, too, failed to find Rosemary. The only clue that she left behind was a tuft of her hair, which was found in some heavy brush just south of Spirit Lake. It does not appear that these strands were DNA tested, and since then, Rosemary's case has gone cold. Rosemary's children and remaining family are desperate for answers and believe that the answers lie somewhere around Spirit Lake. Rosemary Kunst is described as a white female with gray hair, hazel eyes. She stands 5'3" and weighs 122 pounds. She has numerous surgical scars and was last seen wearing a blue fleece shirt, hiking boots, and a blue baseball cap. Anyone with any information is urged to please contact the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department at 530-842-8300 and reference case number 010-01259. Next, Douglas John Legg. In July of 1971, the Legg family took a trip to the 12,500-acre Santanoni estate near the Adirondack Mountains in New York. This beautiful, sprawling estate was owned by a relative of the Legg family, and the family enjoyed many summer vacations at this estate. For 8-year-old Douglas, the estate was the perfect place to run around and explore. The family enjoyed hiking and being outdoors, and by age 8, Douglas had already familiarized himself with the landscape of the estate and knew how to keep himself safe outdoors. Unfortunately, the trip in July of 71 would be their final trip to the Santanoni estate, as it was due to be sold in the coming months. This somber affair would end in further tragedy with the mysterious disappearance of little Douglas. On July 10, 1971, Douglas and his uncle went on a final day hike into the Adirondack wilderness. Douglas ran and skipped down the trails, bursting with excitement and energy. At around 3:30 p.m., Douglas' uncle told him to go back to camp and change. His uncle had instructed him to do this as Douglas was wearing shorts and the next part of the trail was covered with poison ivy. Douglas had walked this trail 1,000 times before, and his uncle knew that he could make it to the camp by himself. After several minutes passed and Douglas had not yet returned, his uncle waited for him patiently. But when even more time elapsed and there was still no sign of Douglas, his uncle ran back to the camp. His uncle was horrified to discover that Douglas was not at the camp. Some of the other Legg children reported seeing him near the main building and on a ridge. The family at the camp called out Douglas' name, but there was no response. Panic now filled the air as the Leggs and the rest of their extended family began combing through the woodlands around them looking for Douglas. After searching for some time and finding nothing, his parents contacted the New York State Police and officially reported their son missing. As the hours passed, the temperatures plummeted, and the Leggs became incredibly concerned for their son. He knew how to navigate the land around the estate and take care of himself, but he would be no match for the freezing temperatures without the proper clothing. Over the next 6 weeks, the Legg family paid for search and rescue teams to go over the area with a fine-tooth comb. Douglas's family were also wealthy and had the means to pay for a huge investigation. The New York State Police also threw all available resources at the case. Despite this, no sign of little Douglas Legg has ever been found. The search for Douglas was one of the biggest in New York's history, and to this day, his case remains cold. Many people believe that Douglas met with foul play, although investigators say that he likely became lost and perished due to the elements. His surviving family are desperate to find out what happened to their sweet, smiling little boy. Douglas Legg was last seen on July 10, 1971. At the time of his disappearance, he was described as a white male child with blonde hair, blue eyes, standing 4 foot 6 inches tall, and weighing 76 pounds. Douglas had a slight speech impediment and was last seen wearing a white short-sleeved polo shirt with navy blue stripes on the collar, navy blue shorts, and black hiking shoes with a circular sole pattern. Anyone with information is asked to please contact Paul Hill of the New York State Police at 518-897-2000 and reference case number BWES 016501. And finally, Arvin Walter Nelson. 51-year-old Arvin Walter Nelson was last seen on August 6, 2014 at China Camp in the Los Padres National Forest. On August 6th, Arvin was dropped off at the camp as he planned to hike through the forest and reach Big Sur Station by August 14th. Arvin was known to be an experienced and skilled hiker, so the 23-mile hike to the Big Sur area was surely going to be an easy one. According to some reports, Arvin had even made an agreement with his friends to ensure his safety. They agreed that if Arvin didn't contact him by August 14th at Big Sur, they would report him missing. Disturbingly, and somewhat prophetically, this plan would have to be enacted on August 14th when Arvin never showed up. His friends never believed that they would have to use this plan, but as Arvin had not been seen or heard from since August 6th, they knew what they had to do. The Monterey County Sheriff's Department was contacted and the report was filed. Soon after, the Sheriff's Department, along with the California National Guard, U.S. Forest Service, California Highway Patrol, and the Coast Guard, flooded into Los Padres National Forest and began their search for Arvin. Using helicopters, dogs, and ground crews, the search and rescue team scoured the trail but found no sign of Arvin. Although Arvin was an experienced hiker and he took along with him more than a week's worth of supplies for this very instance, neither Arvin nor his trusty backpack filled with supplies has ever been found, leaving investigators baffled. Arvin Walter Nelson was last seen on August 6, 2014. He is described as a black male with black hair, brown eyes, standing 6 foot 3 inches tall and weighing 200 pounds. He was last seen wearing brown hiking boots, a dark blue backpack, and carrying leather flip-flop sandals. Well, friends, there you have it, another set of strange disappearances from our national parks. I look forward to your comments, but please keep it friendly and respectful. Till we meet again, be good to yourselves and each other. Stay safe out there. Get a PLB, it could save your life. As for me and my PLB will see you a little further on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.